Hey guys, well, I'm trying a different format on my computer. I got 4 different squares with the different channels open, and I'm seeing how that works. I'm also going to open it on my phone because, as the way it is, I can't see my screen. So let's see how this works. All right. Works. All right, I can hear my voice. We're good. Okay, so we're right back at it. We had some internet issues, probably a storm, but we're right back at it. And so we're gonna pick up in the Q&A of this debate because it gets a little bit heated, if I remember right. And I only saw bits and pieces of this. So let's just see how it goes. So I could see my comments whenever this debate was going on. I have CJ is a covenant keeper, thinks he is, that thinks God will keep him in covenant because if one is not in covenant, according to CJ, one is not saved. Oh, come on. Are you really going to do this to me? What is really causing all these problems? I'm going to look and see a Google Drive. It's up to date. I wonder if this is StreamYard. I wonder if this is an actual StreamYard issue. All right. So let me share my screen again. Man, I'm so thankful that this didn't happen last night in my debate. Okay, we're having some serious problems here. This sucks. I had to cut the other video about 15 times. All right, let's try it again. All right, so this is where the Greek issue is probably going to pop up. I think I'm sharing the wrong screen. Dang it. Stop screen sharing. All right. Let me try again. So this is where the Greek issues are coming up. Why are you sharing that screen? I don't want that screen shared. Hold on, Bear. I'll let you in a minute. Screen share. Share screen. What is the best exegesis? Ah, that's it. I got you now. Okay. So this is talking about 1 John 3 and Chris Morrison, CJ, I'll just back it up. This was good what they said. I'll just let this play right here, and while I go feed Bear or let him in. Let's see whichever one he wants.
Do it. Thank you, Chris. CJ, over to you.
Yeah, I would point out that some of the interpretations. So if you go through the different translations of 1 John 3 and verse 6, very often it comes up something like keeps on sinning
there
or practices sin. Okay. So it is not a matter of never sinning at all. Rather, it is a matter of what your general practice is. There. And I think 1 John is quite plainly saying those who are in Christ do not make a practice out of flagrant, unrepentant sin. We certainly might struggle with sin. In fact, John himself says, if we sin not, you're a liar, truth God in us, right? It might certainly struggle with a level of sin, but it's really different than non-believers sin. We don't practice out of our sinning. We don't go on sinning. We war against our sin, as Paul describes in Romans chapter 7. And I think the answer is really just that.
Chris, the last word. Question was for you this time.
Yeah, so much. This confuses people. There is no reason, and I'm going to say there's no reason to translate this continue to sin or practicing sin. And I'm just going to show you that. That was something that we thought back in the 1970s. I've said this a million times. Modern verbal aspect theory has obliterated that idea. It's not serious. That is not serious. I'm saying this. That's not a serious problem anymore. Take verbal aspect theory. So the word here, this is all the ones here abiding in own right here. All the words abiding in him, not sin. And so the argument here that this word refers to continual sin is built on the idea that this is a present verb, and that present verb is ongoing continuous action. I am telling you, that's false. And I wish now that I have that shows you that that's just false. The present tense does not mean ongoing action. It does not mean that. By the way, the perfect also does not mean past action in the past, a completed action in the past, ongoing results. Those are things we taught first the Greek students. We told them 20 years ago. It's false. Now, the second problem is the word whoever sins. There are some translations that are into the word sinning, practicing sin. It's not this. This is just the word sinning. And again, notice again, they're building this on the present tense. That is simply not what the text is. The King James has it right. The proper translation is, whosoever abideth in him does not sin. Whoever sins has not seen him nor known him. That's the proper translation. This is condition on abiding. This is not continuous ongoing action. And the problem is, if you try to take continuous notion of sin here in the present, first of all, there's two pastoral problems. The idea, and sorry for going this long, but you guys need to understand this. First of all, CJ said, well, they don't struggle with sin the same way unbelievers do, except for the fact that you don't know if you're an unbeliever or not if you're struggling with sin. And the second of all, the same present tense occurs back in chapter 1. So John would be contradicting himself to the two. The thing to say is, if you're abiding in Christ, you're not sinning. Whether that's because this is your inner man, that's the new nature, or because so long as you're abiding, which is the way I take. Either way, it doesn't matter. You can't, John wanted to say, doesn't continue or practice in. There are lots of words in Greek for that. We need to stop that argument. It doesn't.
This platform has changed my life. That's why we do what we do. Thank you for the feedback. Definitely encouraging. He says, thank you, Donnie. And thank you, Chris, for replying to my email. So perhaps you're familiar with Jake. He may have emailed you, Chris. He says, thank you. And he's wondering, can you both interpret Luke 8:13? So we've got an exegetical in two different positions here tonight, lordship and free grace. So how do you, gentlemen, interpret Luke 8:13 in light of those positions? Perhaps since Chris just had...
Hey, Olivia Maynard, I have never met a non-sinner, so he can't be correct. Who can't be correct? You're talking about CJ or you're talking about Chris Morrison? Chris Morrison is that when you're abiding with Christ, in other words, when you're in fellowship with Christ, you're not sinning. But the moment that you sin, you're no longer abiding with Christ. And so, that's what's going on there. Is this going to happen every single time? And maybe it only happens whenever my screen is in full mode. So I'm going to stop putting my screen in full mode and see if that fixes the problem. Oh my goodness. Gotta share my screen again. It seems to be occurring whenever I go full screen, so I'm gonna not go full screen. See if that helps. Okay. It went back. It backed up to where we were. Okay. See, it's buffering. It's buffering. Maybe it's because I got all these other tabs open. So I'm going to close these tabs and see if that helps.
Usually identified as love for the brethren.
Oh, it went way back.
We just got a couple more, and then we'll wrap it up so people can go enjoy the after show.
That's right. He's just wrong on the text. But this is what the text actually says. I've spoken these things. Jesus is telling you.
Don't mean that as an insult, but you
are flatly wrong.
That free grace is new. You can go back to agriculture.
Then you have a third. They also are saved.
No.
They don't go on to
Why did I just do
maturity.
that?
It's only those.
So he says, so grateful for Stand for Truth
All right,
Ministries.
here we are.
Well, praise the Lord. I appreciate that. This platform has changed my life. That's why we do what we do. Thank you for the feedback. Definitely encouraging. He says, thank you, Donnie. And thank you, Chris, for replying to my email. So perhaps you're familiar with Jake. He may have emailed you, Chris. He says, thank you. And he's wondering, can you both interpret Luke 8:13? So we've got an exegetical question, two different positions here tonight, lordship and free grace. So how do you, gentlemen, interpret Luke 8:13 in light of those positions? Perhaps since Chris just had the final word there, since it's a question for both, we only get two responses, one each. Chris, why don't we start with you, and then that way CJ can go second.
Yeah, so I'll keep this brief. And Luke, so
want me to put that on screen, or you're you just doing that yourself?
Yeah, go and pull it. I'll pull it up. Yeah, you got it. There you go. That's my cheat sheet. I found it. All right, so I'll keep this super brief. My reading is that the first is clearly not saved. Those who are on the roadside, those who are here, the devil takes away the word from their heart that they may not believe and be saved. So Luke is clearly saying if you believe, then you're saved. Then verse 13, those in the rock are those who, when they were here, receive. Now, does that say believe? No, but I think it's pretty clearly in text parallel. They receive the joy, but they have no root. Then it says explicitly, they believe for a while. So again, we can say, well, they're not true believers. The text says they believe. So you have to have an outside theology that says they lost their salvation. The text says they clearly believe. Then they fall away in time of temptation. They stop abiding. So this is people who, contrary to CJ, said all believers, he says all true believers prove their vocation. These people didn't. Well, they're not true believers. This is why you can't know you're saved on Calvinism. Then you have a third. They also are saved. They don't go on to maturity. It's only those who have a good and honest heart persevere unto, and that's that abiding. So my reading is that the first is unsaved. The second three are saved, but only the fourth is fruitful. Again, you have to go beyond the text to say that these middle two go to hell. Doubly so when the text explicitly says that they believe. That's the actual language of the text.
Thank you, Chris. CJ, over to you.
Yeah, so I, of course, do not agree. In fact, I think only one of the four are saved, that being the one who is producing fruit at the end. The exact terminology used in the text is that they believe for a while, and that they are choked out, right? That they have no root is another thing that is said in the text. So for those who just imagine in fact, imagine even like a cartoon, right? Because a cartoon you tend to see a lot of times, they'll animate the way that a seed like has root in the ground and then eventually sprouts up, right? Obviously, if there's no root, if the tree has no root, if the seed has no root, then you're not going to get anything from this, right? To me, it seems like the only way you can interpret Luke 8:13 as being genuine believers is you have to assume that a false believer doesn't exist. Because it's quite plain, like I said, they have no root. So the word does not actually establish any sort of a firm hold in them. They believe for a time, meaning that they do not ultimately remain in belief. And obviously we'd have various interpretations there, but what are you here for if you don't already know that, right? And then you also have this idea that they are choked out, that the seed being, I think if I'm remembering correctly, Luke 8, the seed is actually in reference to the gospel itself, is ultimately choked out. And what does that mean? Done away with, dead in their life. So I don't understand how anybody can interpret that as meaning somebody who is saved. I genuinely don't. I don't mean to be rude about it, but it seems to me so obvious that only the fourth category is saved. And this is one of the things, if I could just be perfectly blunt, this is one of the things that bothers me very much about free grace theology, is it's all new. It's all new and it's all niche and it's all radical reinterpretation. And that's just
all Catholic. No, we're all Catholic now. No, I agree with you. So we're all Catholic, and somewhere Sam and them are rejoicing.
Yeah, but I don't think that's true of the rest of the doctrine.
Nah, listen, that historical argument just doesn't work. That's a backhanded slap. You're better than that. Don't do that.
Well, no, hang on. I need to push back on this because this is a real serious point.
It's not a real serious point. It's literally not a serious point.
If you have an interpretation of Scripture that precludes not just the overwhelming majority of former Christian teachers, but literally all of them, up until like the 18th century, where you start to see some aspects. I guess some people would go back to Agricola, but I imagine you being a student of church history would not want to go back to Agricola, since he's very clearly an antinomian. But I have heard some free gracers say that they can go back to Agricola. That's a problem. That is a problem.
The question is what the text says. We can walk through a church history discussion about why church history does what it does, but Catholics rejoice because CJ is on the road to Rome.
No, because Catholics are wrong about what Rome teaches. None of their
you're precluding all the people before.
No, I'm not.
CJ, it doesn't
I can
work.
prove that definitively. It's not like I can prove that very easily. I can show you sola fide with John Chrysostom.
All believers have everlasting life. You deny that some believers are saved. You just said it. Some people believe, and they're not going to be saved. That is you not believing the Bible. I am sorry. I am begging you, stop believing your theology and start believing the Bible.
Yeah, but that's not true, though.
It says
true.
It is true.
That they have no root. It says explicitly that they're choked out. It says explicitly that they believe for a time.
They believed. Okay? They believed. Yes, they stopped believing. They believed. CJ, they believed. Just like John 12:42. They believed.
Yeah, so are you telling me it's not possible for somebody to have a false?
No, I am telling you what the text says. The text
and the text says that their faith was choked out and that they had no root. That's what the text says.
Text.
No, I am explicitly believing the text. They have no root.
And you don't
word for word in there.
That is
word for word in there. They have no root.
Knows what anybody is saying.
We need to go back to this point. Okay, the historical
what happens when you get nasty and fake argument.
You know what? I'm really surprised. I have this sped up, and I understood every one of their points. So, you know, it's kind of, I know why he's saying nobody knows what we're saying, but it's surprisingly clear. It's like when you watch a sitcom and everybody's talking and you still understand what's going on, even though it's very chaotic. I'm surprised I was able to understand all that.
What about the Catholic Church?
No, you cannot say that my comparison is in any way comparable to the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is flatly wrong. You and I both agree that free grace is new.
You are flatly wrong.
But
No,
it is
I don't agree.
well documented in early church history that sola fide exists, that predestination exists, that eternal security exists, that sola scriptura exists, and it is also just as well documented that free grace does not exist. These are historical facts. Okay,
that's not true. And truth
is
isn't
100% true. I can show you the references.
Even if it was, truth isn't known by vote.
Church is not known by vote, but when the Lord says the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church.
Watch this. This is a killer argument. I haven't meditated on it, but just watch how it flows.
You cannot go back and say the church literally was so wrong that they could not properly interpret any of the scriptures.
No.
That's a problem.
Let me ask you a question about 16. Are gates offensive or defensive?
Gates are defensive.
Defensive. So what would it mean for a gate to prevail?
It would mean it would fail.
Fail. From what? Defending an attack or making an attack?
From defending an attack.
So who is attacking hell?
Who is attacking hell?
Yes, who's attacking hell?
I don't think that, what do you mean? This is
if a gate is defensive, that somebody's attacking it. Who's attacking hell?
I don't think the conversation isn't about hell. It's who's attacking who. It's a soteriological conversation.
You're not answering my question. Listen, Jesus said, I will build my church or community and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Who is attacking hell? Because hell is defensive. A gate is defensive. Who is issuing the attack?
Who's attacking? Jesus is attacking hell.
Jesus is attacking hell. Exactly. Now, what? I know you think of hell and you think about the place where people are burning forever. What does the word Hades mean in Greek?
It means
What's
the grave.
The basic meaning? The grave. So when Jesus says that the gates of hell won't prevail, what is Jesus? How does he bring about final salvation? What does he actually do, CJ?
He conquers the grave.
Conquers the grave. And then he raises us from the grave. So what Jesus is saying in that passage is that when he comes back, the grave won't be able to keep his people from being together. You are reading it the way Catholics do to mean that the church is on offense and will win. This is another reason why you have to stop listening to false teachers and let the text say what the text says.
No, I'm not.
That was amazing. If everything Chris said is correct, that just shut down every Catholic and Orthodox argument. Because they want to try to say, oh, you're saying the church fell into apostasy. And they'll try to use that passage to argue that it can't fall into apostasy. But if that's the correct interpretation of the passage, there's no room for the Catholic or Orthodox view.
Interpreting it the way Catholics interpret. I'm interpreting it the way that it is meant to be interpreted.
I think you're clearly seeing you're not reading the text.
Because the fundamental point was not addressed.
I'll give you the link again, Howdy, if you want to try your luck. I'm going to put it in the big chat. So it's going to show up like about 3 different times, maybe more than that, but just click on it.
Okay, which is that you have a theology that by your own implicit admission, not 20 seconds ago,
I have a methodology,
not a theology in the early church. And it doesn't exist in the medieval church, and it doesn't exist in the Reformed church.
Methodology, gentlemen. So, okay, that's good. I don't mind a little bit of sparring in between each question. I like to just let it go, less strict. And then once we've exhausted the question, that's good. You know, sometimes these kinds of moments, especially as someone who does my own debates, the Q&A, you tend to get some of these moments, and I like to just let them go for a while. So good stuff. That was fun. All right, let's move on. East Gate Adoptionist has another one here. $50 super chat. Thank you very much for the support there, Eastgate. And the question, we will assume it is for Chris again. So here we go. The Son of Man is compared to Jacob's ladder in John 1, verse 51. Could this be describing the born again? Can the advocate sacrifice be dragged up into heaven? Wouldn't that ruin the ladder? Are we abiding in him as we refuse to let go of his death? A few questions in one, Chris. Feel free to take them.
Yeah, I have to say, I always love his questions because they're like riddles.
I was
He's
about
the,
to say, I don't think I
he's the
understand
Riddler.
this
He's the
message.
DC villain, the Riddler.
I'll read 50 and 51, and I have said this before. Man, sometimes you're just so deep for me. The natural man cannot receive your spiritual wisdom. No, I'm picking there. All right, let me try to give an honest answer. Jesus answered him, because I'm looking at the text again. Because I told you, I saw you under the fig tree, you believe. So he's surprised by that. As much as Jesus can be surprised, you'll see greater things. Then he said to him, most certainly I say to you, I tell you, hereafter you will see the heavens opened. Yep, the angels of God.
Okay, you're in the back. Hey, howdy.
Hey, you got
Welcome
your
back.
internet working?
Yeah, it's back. I'm still not going full screen because it's possible that may be causing the problem on the buffering side of things. So, but I like I said, I think I had multiple problems hitting me all at once.
I have
but yeah,
something
we're
to
back.
say.
All right, let's hear it.
So this Gates of Hades is actually
Odyssey and the Aeneid and all that.
Iliad, Odyssey stuff. Yeah, so this is what I'm saying. Like the New Testament authors, you could say like the literary history or the backdrop or however you want to phrase it. Certainly, most of it, if not nearly all of it, is the Septuagint. But they're also pulling from other literary traditions from Athens, because they're writing in Greek. At the time the New Testament authors were writing this book, the way that you learned Greek was by reading and writing the Odyssey and the Iliad. That was their. It wasn't like scripture, but it was just like the book that you read. You know how like when you teach children English, like this is like the standard book that you read.
Yes.
English. So the audience does have that background. Like it would be one thing to say that, we might find a way to dismiss it by saying, well, the Jews didn't read that. Well, if they were reading and writing in Greek, they very probably did. So they do have access to that. And I think this is one of those instances where they are. No, I'm not saying that the Odyssey is scripture. What I'm saying is, or the Iliad, what I'm saying is that because they have this shared poetic background, they can use concepts and imagery and themes from like extra biblical literature to make a point. But so the Gates of Hades. This is from the Iliad, and it's when what's his name? Achilles, who's like the main guy. So Achilles is like this heroic figure, sort of like a role model for the Greek citizen. He's very honorable, virtuous. He's like the book that you read to get your morals and your ethics and your how to live appropriately in a society, sort of like Gilgamesh or something like that. This is how epic poetry was used, was to sort of inoculate someone into a community. Like, this is how we do things here, So the thing about Achilles is there's a one-to-one correspondence between what he thinks and what he does. So you never have to ask him anything. You don't have to ask him if he's hungry. You know if he's hungry or not because he'll be eating. You never have to ask him if he's tired. If he's tired, then he'll be sleeping. If he's not, then he's not tired. Or if he's angry, you don't have to ask him. If he's killing people, then he's angry. And if he's not killing anyone, then he's not angry. There's like this very close connection between his thoughts and his action. He's a man of action. Okay. So this quote comes up when he's talking because, what is it to lie? To lie about something means you have to hold something in your head and say something different. So you sort of have to be like in a contradiction of sorts, because you're thinking one thing and saying another. So you have to have two contradictory thoughts in your mind, double-minded in a sense. And this is where we sort of get the word for confession as homologia. It means word the same. So what you're thinking and what you're saying is the same. You're not lying. You're confessing. Okay. So the quote comes up here. He says, "More than the gates of Hades, I hate the man who says one thing and thinks another, or thinks one thing and says another." Because he doesn't understand this kind of person, because he's just, what he thinks is what he does. And the people who lie are sort of like just strange and bizarre, and he almost thinks like they're not human or something like that. Okay, so the gates of Hades. Why? So it's something that, so it's the object of hate for Achilles.
Okay. So are you making the argument that Jesus is depicted as the greater Achilles?
No. I'm almost done, and then I'm almost done with this, and then I'll explain how I think the New Testament authors are using this imagery.
All right.
So the gates of Hades. Technically, Hades just means the invisible world. That's the definition offered by Plato in, I think in the Gorgias, or one of his, where he says Hades just means because that's theos means like the negation, and oidos means like sea, so it's the unseen world, is its etymological. I'm not saying that's what it has to mean necessarily, but that's the etymology. That's how it's generally used in Greek poetry. That's how Plato uses it. It's where you go when you die. You don't see it. Now the gates are sort of what's between the seen world and the unseen world. So how do you go to how do you get to the unseen world? That's pretty simple. You have to die. So the entrance into the unseen is death. Death is also something that Achilles hates. He's like a warrior. He's fighting for glory. He does want to die at some point, but he doesn't want to like lose a battle. He wants to overcome death in a sense, because when you're fighting someone, they're trying to kill you. And so you're prevailing over death when you defeat someone who is attempting to kill you. And so the main idea here is death and the unseen world. Well, it's mainly the unseen world and how you get there, and how you get there is by death. Okay, so now we get the New Testament. Jesus says the church will not prevail against the gates of Hades, or the gates of Hades will not prevail against the church, right? So I think the main point of comparison is the object of the church's hate, like your enemies, like your whatever you're in opposition to, generally. So I think at the broadest level, it's saying something like nothing beats any. And if the church has an enemy, that enemy will be defeated, no matter what that enemy would be.
Okay.
Now, more specifically, I think you could also read it as it's talking about death. That death will not defeat the church. There's like a pretty straightforward reading on my lights, is that people are going to get resurrected, and death will be abolished and stuff like that. And I think I had something else to say really briefly. It was about Eastgate Adoptionist. I wanted to say it says Scripture decoded, but every time he makes a poster, it sounds like really encoded. Like he makes things less. He makes things more difficult to understand. He has like an encoder ring. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. So true. Yeah. So it sounds like the background that you just gave complements what Chris is saying. And so that's interesting. I know about Heiser's not the only one that does it, but the Capernaum imagery of the cave that's underneath the mountain where they were at, I think it was Caesarea Philippi, it's called the gates of Hades. That idea there, and Pan was sacrificed there, and sacrifice to there, and those things like that. So I appreciate you making the Achilles connection. It does have a polemical force, and like I have said before, Luke on the road to Emmaus. Like I said, I feel like that's from the Odyssey, because it's like when Athena is appearing and all that stuff. I think that's Great-eyed Athena. Is that from there? Right.
Yeah, is there something? Can you unplug your mic and plug it back in? You're like, it's like really. Actually, let me look at the YouTube. I don't know if it's just me. Yeah, it's like really bad, even on YouTube. I don't know.
All right, so that it's not the mic. It's not the mic. It's the signal. Is it clear right now?
No, it's like really, really fuzzy. If you look at yourself on YouTube, it's like kind of difficult to understand.
All right, let me refresh and let me see if that helps.
So, I'll wait because I actually want to tell Charles about what I have to say about it.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
No, it's the same, but I can live with it. It's not. I can hear you. It's just it sounds pretty poor.
I don't understand why. I got reduced mic noise, all of that.
Could you like unplug it and plug it back in or something?
Yeah, I don't have much experience with this particular mic.
Oh, it's fixed. It's fixed. Leave it alone. It's fine.
Okay, all right.
Whatever just happened, fixed.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident they're working on the internet somewhere, and it's just crazy.
Oh no. So you asked, is there a point of comparison between Jesus and Achilles? I think absolutely there is. Mm-hmm. Remember when I said what the purpose of Greek epic poetry was, or generally epic poetry in general, was to inoculate people into a community. This is how we do things here. If you want to be
socialization,
yes, this is sociological. If you want to be a Greek citizen, you're expected to conform to the norms of Greek society, and those are exemplified by our heroes, our characters. Mm-hmm. This is what we're striving for. This is our goal. This is our aim. So that's first exemplified by Achilles, who's this warlike guy. So to be a Greek back then, you just win your battles and fight, passionately without regard for your life. The second is Odysseus in the Odyssey, where he's a little bit more crafty. He uses his brain as a weapon more than his brute strength. And then Plato tries to make a new role model for the Athenian citizen called Socrates. This is Socrates. This is who's virtuous and good and just, and this is the role model I think people should have. Now, I think a large part of what the New Testament authors are doing is saying, look, this is who we think is righteous and good and just. This is what we're aiming for. This is our role. This is our community role model. This is our hero. This is our Achilles. Jesus is our Odysseus. The Odyssey just came out. I don't know if anyone has watched that.
So no, I haven't watched it yet.
So if you're in the audience, if you watch that, some of what the New Testament authors are doing is saying, okay, we need to replace. He's sort of supplanting Achilles and Odysseus in a way, and saying, no. Those should not be your role model. Your role model should be Jesus. And then, that's so I think that's something that the New Testament authors are interested in, is what it means to be a member of our community. What are our norms, our ethics, all of that. I think that is one of the reasons why it's being written in this way. So yes, I take it that there's definitely a comparison being made between Achilles and Jesus.
Okay, and by the way that you described it, you would even say that it's a polemic against.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He's saying Achilles should not be your hero. Jesus should be your hero.
Okay. Thank you. I'll definitely evaluate it.
Ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Okay, so I'm not so. Yeah, Jesus is going to be ascended into heaven, and that's obvious enough. So the Son of Man is compared to Jacob's ladder. Could this be describing the born again? No, there's nothing here about being born again. The advocate of the sacrifice dragged. Can the advocate sacrifice be dragged into heaven? He isn't dragged. He just goes to heaven. No one lays down my life. I go it on my own sake. Wouldn't that ruin the ladder? No. He's just ascending to himself. Are we abiding in him as we refuse to let go of? No, I don't understand the question. Are we abiding in him as we refuse to let go of his death? I'm not sure if I follow the negatives, but if you let go of his death, you're not abiding in him. If you hang on to his death in the confession and love one another, you're still abiding. So I don't know if in that mixture that you got an answer. Maybe you can do another one of those 30-second shorts with your flame face thing. Go for it, man.
I'm not even gonna try. I genuinely don't know what Eastgate is trying to say. I'm sorry, Eastgate. I don't mean that as an insult, but I honestly have no idea. I don't know. I'm not good at riddles, man. Okay.
I just work here, brothers. I just work here. So I get the question and you do your best to work through it. So, all right, let's move on to the next. Thank you, gentlemen. Chris Freegrace. All right. $20 super chat. Thank you for the support. Eastgate's coming at Chris. Chris Freegrace is coming at CJ. We're well balanced here tonight. Here we go. CJ, verse 11 literally tells us why he wrote these things. It says that his joy remain in us and our joy may be full. Can you show me that joy means hell in the Bible? Shouldn't it say, I write this so you are saved?
Yeah, I think this is kind of a weird question because no, I can't show you that joy means hell in the Bible, and I don't want to, and I have no need to. It's not a claim I made. It's not a claim I defend. It's not a claim any lordship person I've ever heard of would ever try to defend. So I think if I was being most charitable, what I think Chris is meaning to say here, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm just trying to interpret this in as charitable fashion as I can, is he's saying, verse 11 says that these things are written so that my joy may remain in you. If Christ is giving a warning about people who might not be saved, how does that allow for joy to remain in us? If I understood that correctly, then I guess this will be a good answer, or at least an answer to the question. Whether or not it's good, I guess, is up for you to judge. And if I wasn't, then I apologize. And I would just answer that question flatly. No, I don't think there's anything contradictory there. In fact, I would say that considering the fact that he's talking about discipleship here, it would be a quite joyous thing for Christ to say, hey, your discipleship and the fruits of the Spirit showing up in your life is actually evidence that I am with you, that you can see in your life, right? It's not to say it's the only evidence. Obviously, abiding in belief, I think, is evidence. There's the fruits of the Spirit itself. Good works, I think, can be evidence, but nevertheless, to me, it reads like just as much as it can be condemnation for those who do not abide, it can be assurance for those who do abide. So I don't know why I would want to make a one-to-one of joy to hell. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Shouldn't it say, I write this so you are saved? I think you probably mean so that you know you are saved. No, I don't think it needs to communicate that either. I think it just simply needs to teach what it teaches, which is that this is what discipleship, broadly speaking, looks like, at least because it's not going into too much detail. This is how you become a disciple, namely by abiding in Christ, and these are the consequences for you not abiding in Christ. I think it could be as simple as that.
Chris, over to you.
Yeah, I don't think CJ followed the argument. Pull my screen up. Doesn't surprise me, to be honest, given the fact that he said it earlier. He can't imagine. I told you when I was debating with Matt, if somebody ever can't imagine a position, that's an indicator they've not actually thought it through seriously. I can imagine all kind of excellent reasons. I think that CJ's position is right. He's just wrong on the text. But this is what the text actually says. I've spoken these things. Jesus is telling you why he just told you everything in verse 1 through 10, which includes verse 6. I told these things to you. Why? The way CJ reads 15 is to know whether or not you're saved. That's the way CJ reads it. If you're abiding, you're going to bear fruit. If you're not abiding, you're not going to bear fruit. That's the reading, whether he intends it or not. That's what CJ's reading entails. What Jesus is saying is the reason I'm telling you these things is so that my joy remains in you and so that your joy is made full. This is the same thing we see in 1 John chapter 1, verse 3. The reason we write is about fellowship. If you make verse 6 about going to hell, this becomes a diagnostic about how to go to heaven. This is no longer about joy because this is in no way make this, as CJ said, there's no joy in this.
Hey, Smokey, you're welcome to pull up. The link is pinned, I think. Or it's in the chat at least. I don't have my other screens up because my stuff's crashing on me. But you say, why cover free grace versus free grace light? Well, I understand why you're calling CJ that. but the reality is I debate free gracers too. So it's just part of discovering truth, you know, the challenge, the sharpening iron or whatever. So hold on, my cat is meowing. So once I'll let this play when I see what this cat wants.
This right here does not, if burning
What
goes to hell,
bear?
does not comport with
What do you
joy.
want?
However, if this is about the unabiding believer who can be destroyed, and
Wanna
this is
go
a
out?
warning, then it can comport. So there's really only two possibilities. Either Jesus is threatening you with hell so that you, which is the Arminian position, at least is consistent, so that your joy may be full, or it's threatening the unabiding believer with destruction so that you stay consistent. CJ's position that this is hypothetical or about non-believers is unrelated to Jesus's actual points. That's exegesis, not theology. That's methodology, not theology.
Thank you, Chris. CJ, you get the last word.
Yeah, I would just point out a couple things. If it's a problem for the central theme of joy here, for threat of hellfire, then it's a problem for threat of ultimate destruction also, because it's still a threat and it's still grievous. So I don't think that's going to get anybody out of anything. Now, the greater point, the more important point here is that he's saying that this breaks kind
I'm pretty sure my one cat's looking for the other one, and the other cat's under my bed right now, hiding.
of the context, if I'm understanding correctly, that this is all meant to strengthen our resolve, to make us more joyous in Christ.
Okay, Smokey, this stream is probably not going to be very long because we're just in the Q&A of this. But I do plan on doing the Steve Drake thing later. I think, yeah, I should go ahead and get Steve Drake, and that I'm not really in a hurry to cover my debate. But that may happen too. I don't know. But yeah, so maybe you can pull up on one of those if we're not live at that time. Just keep an eye out.
And for some reason, there seems to be this random aside in verse 6 that talks about how you get saved.
By the way, Smokey, I would like for you to put your eyes on my debate with Kevin about, Matthew 7. You probably won't agree with me, but I think you can point out certain things.
But I don't think that's a good interpretation of my position, quite frankly. And if I haven't been clear on that, then I guess that's my fault. But if I have been clear, then I would just recommend, Chris, that you go back and listen to my arguments. I have not at any point here said that this is a lesson on how to get saved. In fact, I haven't even actually made any lordship or perseverance points. I have simply made the claim that the text communicates those who do not abide, do not bear fruit, are cast out, wither, and die ultimately in hellfire. And I think that's all that the text, up until verse 6 at least, is teaching. Now, obviously, beyond that, it's either you're going to add additional.
Why would you assume it's hellfire? And that's why I want to bring up Ezekiel 15 in a minute. Remind me, Howdy, when this Q&A thing is over, that I need to bring up Ezekiel 15.
Okay.
Thoughts to that, but up until verse 6, I think that's the only claims that are being made, and that's the central point of disagreement. Does the text teach that that non-abiding confessional believers ultimately are unsaved? I think it does, and it's that simple.
Okay, CJ, you get the last word since it was for you. Move on to the next. Static, $5 super chat. Question for CJ. Do you know who the elect are? And if not, how can you be sure you are one? And given limited atonement, doesn't that make your faith subjective?
No, I do not know who the elect are. Nobody has perfect knowledge of who's saved, sans Christ himself. If not, how can you be sure that you are one? Well, you, even in your own position, you can't know that somebody else is saved, but you can know if you're saved. I referenced before in our previous.
So, Smokey, it sounds like CJ is, I don't know if this is possible, he's a fabulist. Because he mentioned about certainty later on and all of that. I mean, earlier on. So I'm not sure if that's a correct read on him. but it seems to be how he's arguing in portions of this debate or in the questions.
This debate, the Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are sons. I also could reference the chastening of God. I think abiding in faith is a good providing of assurance. In fact, it's interesting, Free Grace will say you don't have to, at least most of them, don't say that you have to abide in faith, but obviously if you don't have faith, clearly you don't have assurance because you don't believe any of it. So why would you be assured that you're going to heaven if you don't even think heaven exists? That would be bizarre. So yeah, the way that you can know that you're saved is, I think, first off, it's ultimately separate from, whether or not you know who the elect are, or whether or not free grace is true, or whether its lordship is true. But the way, again, you know you're saved because the Spirit bears witness to you, because you have an abiding faith, because you walk in God's ways. There are numerous different ways in which God gives assurance to you. And then to the last point, given limited atonement, doesn't that make your faith subjective? No, just flatly no. In order for my faith to be subjective, it would have to be grounded in something other than objective reality. But it's not. It's grounded in the objective reality that Christ died on the cross, resurrected, and through him we have remission of sins. So if you'd like to clarify, Static, as to what exactly you mean by subjective, in case I've misinterpreted it, please do. But no, I don't think limited atonement makes your faith subjective at all.
Chris?
Yeah, I'll say two things. Number one, this is one of the reasons I'm not a Calvinist anymore. I just don't think that Calvinists, or at least most of them, don't actually take the implications of their theology seriously enough. What CJ is doing, the fact that he actually looks at his own life and says, yeah, I see fruit, I think I'm saved, means he has to water down the sin and puff up his works and say, I make the cut. That's terrible. That's just, the problem is there are a lot of us who are not willing to do that. And the fact is, he simply doesn't know. Anything he can give you, the Spirit's talking to me. That's Mormon burning in the bosom. Well, I know Christ died for me. No, you don't. And this is the second one of subjective faith. That subjective translates the right word, because if CJ on his own theology is reprobate and doesn't know it, if he has a spurious faith, then what's going to happen is he's going to fall away. And the truth is, Jesus did not die for him. So he cannot say he has ever had faith. Not even now, he can't say that he has faith in the objective fact that Jesus died for him, because there is no such claim. So he has always only had this internal feeling of, well, I believe and I think I see the fruit to match that. And he has to puff his works up so that, yeah, that matches. And my sin isn't as bad. And I can compare that to people who I think clearly are not good enough. And it gets your eyes off Jesus, and it contradicts the Bible, which says you believe in Jesus. That's all that matters. Oh, but they didn't really believe, and now we're back in the circle because he's appealing to his theology again. It's a terrible way to live. Don't live that way, y'all. Don't be like CJ. Believe in Jesus.
I have something to say. Do you have something?
No. I'm just going to say that sounded pretty good. Go ahead, Howdy.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So Calvin wrote about this. He said, you obviously can't look at your works to see if you're saved or not as like a test. I don't know what they call them. The people that think that there are some criteria that they can use to evaluate whether or not they or another person is saved.
Yeah, experimental predestinarians is the term Dillo uses.
Right. So that's not going to work for pretty much obvious reasons. I wouldn't change much what Chris said. I think it's hitting the nail on the head there. Even Calvin said, a man cannot put a drop of assurance in his life, his works, or anything of himself. All the assurance is on Christ and his work and his accomplishments.
Yep. Cool.
CJ, last word?
Yeah, I mean, I just got to be perfectly frank. I think it's asinine to say the Calvinists don't believe in Jesus. That's just totally false.
Problem with that. If the Calvinist has belief, if it's spurious belief, then that belief doesn't believe for salvation in Jesus' limited atonement. And so if that's true, then all you have is an intellectual knowledge of belief. And they hate that idea. And usually the reason whenever they bring arguments against intellectual knowledge or whatever, intellectual belief, they're doing that because they're essentially made up the assumption that gift faith is the only right kind of faith, the Calvinistic gift faith, and this gift faith has these characteristics. That's what they do.
So the
Perfect point. It's barely.
I have something. So on this idea of knowledge or of assurance. So classically, knowledge is just defined as it's a belief. So assuming that you're a Christian, you should have some familiarity with that word at least. One way of talking about what a belief is, you could say something like the disposition to sincerely assert it. So if I ask you, how tall are you? And you sincerely assert you're 8 feet tall. So even if that's false, that's still a belief if you have the disposition to assert it sincerely. It's also like a positive attitude or an affirmational attitude. Not sure how much that does to clarify, but the second part is that it has to be true, and what truth is. People argue about that. Third is this idea of justification, but not in the sense of soteriology, in the sense of epistemology. Epistemic justification just means good reason to believe. So, for example, you're 8 feet tall, or you believe that you're 8 feet tall, and let's say that you're not, but you had a measurement that said that you were 8 feet tall, like you had a tape measure, and you measured yourself and you were 8 feet tall. So you would have a reason to believe that you're 8 feet tall. But unbeknownst to you, like the tape measure was faulty, or, you could have reasons, but just because you have reasons doesn't mean that it's true or that you believe it. So knowledge is the combination of these three ideas of belief, truth, and having a good reason to believe it. So like if I believe that it's going to rain because I watched the news and it said it was going to rain, and those people are generally reliable about predicting the weather, and I have a good reason to believe that it's going to rain, and I could even say that I know that it's going to rain, even if it doesn't rain, if you're a fallibilist. In any event, the question is, do people have good reasons to believe that they're saved? Now, depending on your position, you'll give different reasons. And one of the reasons that CJ is proffering is that I have fruits of the Spirit that's evidence for my salvation, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, one way to think about this is, our fruits of so what evidence is, we have to talk about what evidence is. Evidence just is anything that is confirmational of a hypothesis. So, for example, I'm saved is a hypothesis. And what evidence is are facts that are more probable if the hypothesis is true. So let's say I have the hypothesis that it rained, and I look at the ground, and the ground is wet. Well, the ground being wet is more likely if it rained. So that evidence is confirmational to the hypothesis that it rained. Or if I see that it's dry, that's disconfirmational, because the ground being dry is not expected on the hypothesis that it rained. Just one more example is there's a cake in my kitchen is a hypothesis. Let's say I smell cake. My smelling cake is more expected if there's cake than if there's not. So that would be evidence. Whether or not there's a cake there doesn't matter. That would still be evidence, because evidence just is anything that's expected given the hypothesis.
Okay.
So he's saying that fruits of the Spirit is evidence of salvation. So is fruit of the Spirit more expected given that you're saved? I mean, I would say so. So yes, I would agree that fruits of the Spirit is evidence for salvation in the sense of confirmational of the hypothesis. But this is the problem, and this is what Chris is saying, and this is what Calvin would say, that if you really look at yourself objectively, you're going to immediately conclude that you're not saved because of any sin that you do. You're going to say, "Oh, well, obviously I'm not saved, because then I wouldn't be." So if good things are evidence of the salvation hypothesis, there's this principle in evidence called evidential parity. So remember when I said if it rained, if the ground is wet, that's confirmation for it raining. By evidential parity, I just mean that if that evidence is not there, then that's evidence against the hypothesis. So if the ground is not wet, that would be evidence against the hypothesis that it rained. So if good things are evidence for salvation, it means that bad things are evidence against salvation. And Calvin would argue that if anyone looks at their life objectively, then they would, if that's the means by which we determine whether or not we're saved, everyone is just going to conclude that they're not. So the only way to get around that is what Chris said: is you have to minimize your sin and maximize your fruit or whatever in order to overcome that deficit. And so in a sense, Calvin and others would say you have to deceive yourself to come to the conclusion that the evidence of your works total, all of them, are evidence of your salvation. Sorry if that was kind of long-winded, but
No, I've followed around with it. I like some of the technical definitions you gave, and I appreciate that. Just like the previous comment. What I want to say though is let me reply to Smokey real quick. Yeah, it's on SFT. It was last night. So let me just catch up in the chat. Then I got something to say about the fruit issue. It says CJ has always been an infallible fatalist. Yeah, totally a Van Tillian style infallibilist. They claim they
just
can.
Before you go on, it's
Yeah.
You're going to want to pronounce that infallible. So
How am I saying it?
You said like infallible. It's just infallible.
Infallible.
No. Infallible.
Infallible.
Yes.
Infallible. Man, I feel like I'm watching Sesame Street. You know how they put the syllables and you get it faster and they get closer together and you got the whole word. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So they claim that they can know the way God knows because God reveals it infallibly.
No, infallible.
Oh, I see. Infallibly. Infallibly.
No.
I can't do it. There's no way I can do it.
Okay,
I can't do it. Because look, infallibly, I can do it slow. But if I go fast, infallibly. I'm sorry. You're just going to have to accept it. You're going to have to accept my fallible pronunciation of that.
Well, I will say this, though. I do think it is important that you pronounce things as they're like pronounced in the academic linguistic community, because to someone who is familiar with how words are pronounced, if you're pronouncing them in a strange way, yeah, that's one thing, is it can harm your outreach in places and areas like that sometimes.
I think what I'll probably do is try to say the non-adjective form. You know, just say infallible. Infallible, is that fine if I just say infallible?
You keep on saying infallible. You're doing this EU thing when it's just
Infallible.
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 Infallible. Upsilon or epsilon.
Yes.
It's just infallible.
Infallibly. But the problem is the end. The ending is what's getting me. Infallibly. See, it turns into a U when I try to say it. Right. It's just not going to happen, Howdy. Not with that word. I'm just going to have to use a non-adjective form of the word. So, yeah. Okay. Pure nonsense. Monergism denies salvific criteria beyond mental assent. Okay. It has to, even that must be God's work somehow. Free grace denies believing is work. Calvinism confirms it is a work, but it's God's work. If you mean a work as in an activity, I don't have a problem with that. It's a cognitive act, so I don't deny that. The problem is my understanding is when we're talking about works, that's forming things in terms of how the Catholics were looking at things, and the Catholics assume like a here's another word I can't say, prevenient grace.
That's right.
Yeah, prevenient grace. In my view, I don't hold to a prevenient grace, and so in that view, my understanding is they say that God has to give you prevenient grace, and then God is working with you by you using your faith to believe. So God gives you the prevenient grace, but you got to exercise the act of faith and to believe in him. And so therefore that's why it's synergistic. But if prevenient grace is not needed, then there is no synergistic involvement, at least in the Catholic way of saying things or the Orthodox way of saying things, because I don't start with prevenient grace. That's my current understanding about that. So I kind of deny the claim about I kind of the framing of synergism versus monogenism. The Catholic definition of synergism is false, and the Calvinist counter to that, which is monogism, that God does it all, it's false too. So that's where I'm at. Okay. Not all free grace is denied. Believing is a work. I think it is God doing it per John 6:29. This is the work of God that you believe. Okay. Well, monogenism has to pick a lane. It is either God's work or it isn't God's work at all. Yeah, you're right. Monogenism does have to pick it. I think faith is always a work. Continued faith is a work, as noted in the commandment given to believers. All right. 1 John 3:23. Howdy doody. I guess it's to you. So when atheists virtue single God, they're showing us how moral they are, and they are, so they are. Okay, this is dealing with fruit. I'll get back to that. Yet the one sinless is still one they despise. How can any sound reason the atheist virtue single God and hate Jesus Christ? It's like a Aussie and assume. Okay, you're tripping, the freak. Chuck has overcome with a quick snap rap Jesus. Woo! Crunk grace. Yeah. All right, so about the fruit. Here's the thing. When you see somebody, I'll start with works first. When you see someone doing a work, all that tells you is that they're working. Okay, they're doing an activity. It doesn't tell you whether they're in fellowship with God when they're doing that activity. It doesn't tell you anything about their motive. It doesn't tell you if they're being empowered by the Holy Spirit. In a similar way, the only time that a Christian bears fruit is when he's in fellowship with God. So the problem is when people talk about fruit, they think of character, love, joy, peace, patience, these different attributes or whatever, characteristics. And the thing is that an unbeliever can show love because he's made in the image of God. And because the unbeliever can be patient and kind and all of this means you cannot tell by looking at fruit whether someone is saved, yourself or anybody else, because you never know whether that fruit is, I don't know if the word is energized or whether that fruit is a result of the person being in fellowship with God. So you can't know from works nor from fruit whether someone is saved based on the argument I just gave.
I think the way I would phrase it is a bit different because
okay,
it's just how we're using the word know. And so, like, let's say there's this hypothesis. There's this hypothesis that Charles is saved, right?
Okay.
Now the question is there any you could say like empirical evidence that for that hypothesis? In the sense that
so you would take fruit like an indicator then?
Yeah, but if we're evaluating that, then everyone would be unsaved. So
if we truly, yes, you're absolutely right. If we really looked at what we're doing, we sin more than we're in fellowship with God. I mean, if we have a high view of sin, I think you're absolutely right. If we really know the state of our sinfulness, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
So the evidence of everyone works is that they're damned. But that's why, but that's sort of like a strange conclusion. And so it's probably not a good idea to use empirical evidence to determine that. Because even
Right.
so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Even worth respecting. Like that, it is clearly a misrepresentation of our position. First of all, this idea that we're like puffing up our own works and denigrating the works of others is flatly not true. I can quote John MacArthur. I can quote Paul Washer. I can quote Ray Comfort. I can quote Calvin himself.
But none of them are being consistent and following things out logically.
No,
The
he's
term
actually
y'all use.
Calvin said the opposite.
Good.
I can pull it up. I'm going off the top of my head, but if people dispute it, I can definitely go find it in the Institutes. As he says, man cannot place one drop of assurance of salvation in himself, whatever. Because if you look to your work, you will determine that you're damned.
Now,
That's
one of
Calvin
the issues.
said.
One of the issues with the Institutes is it grew over time, and some people have made the claim that there's inconsistencies where Calvin is actually contradicting in the Institutes because they were written over a certain period of time, and his theology changed subtly, but it still changed. One of the
things that changed was this is important, is that he was you could say like a 4-pointer, because he did not believe in limited atonement. Because limited atonement is sort of like on first impression, limited atonement is like somewhat disgusting. And so he didn't believe in limited atonement, but he didn't realize that if Christ's death secures, like, I forget exactly how he phrases it, but essentially Calvin's view entails universalism without limited atonement. That's why they have limited atonement. It's really hard to find limited atonement anywhere in the Bible. Limited atonement is postulated to remove the to deny universalism, because if Christ died for everyone, then everyone's saved. But by the way that they think that salvation works through irresistible grace, because if Christ died for everyone and that grace is irresistible to anyone, then everyone has to be saved. Calvin, I guess, didn't realize this, but he never mentioned limited atonement. The person after him, I forget his name, Alvin or something.
Beza,
he added, I think, limited atonement in order to prevent the result of universalism.
Okay, that's interesting.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's good, because Geisler says the same thing, that originally Calvin was a 4-pointer, and that's why he calls he would call himself a moderate Calvinist, because he wasn't as extreme, and extreme's not the same as hyper in Geisler's language. Extreme Calvinist means that those are the 5 pointers that we know, and so moderate Calvinist would be Almareldianism.
Is consistently not that your works make the cut. In fact, the reason why the Reformation is what actually is what popularized the doctrine of sola fide, is because it was the reformers who understood that your works don't make the cut. But there is a difference between saying my works don't make the cut and recognizing a fundamental change within myself as it pertains to sin. Just think of the word metanoia itself. It is a change of mind. It is a change of direction, right? If I can see a change of direction in my own mind as it pertains to sin, that is not saying my works somehow make the cut. What it is saying is what I once loved without struggle, I no longer do. And that's not evidence of my...
But earlier, CJ said that a person basically can repent before being saved. So repentance is not a proof of salvation or whatever. I don't know what word to use, because Howdy's got me thinking about evidence and maybe what
they think regeneration precedes faith, and then to faith is to sort of, you could say, change your mind in a sense. I think first of all, I think changing mind is sort of like a bad rendition. So the preposition meta can mean after or change or with. And it has some other usages too, but those are the three primary ones. So, for example, let's say he had the attitude towards murdering, and then he changed his mind or his attitude, and he wanted to murder even more. Technically, that would be metanoia on his definition.
Right. Ryrie uses that as an example in So Great Salvation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, he's quoting. I'll show you real quick. He's quoting some ancient writer. I can't remember who it was right now. And I've done the research. I got a video where I went through all of that stuff, the primary sources and all that.
Yeah. So like the three main senses, it can be like regret. So like an afterthought. So like I did something bad and afterwards I wish that I hadn't. That's one way of looking at it. Another is that it's a change where at the time I thought that I wanted this, and then now I don't think in that way. But I think one of the important ones that people leave out is this idea of with. So
have you read Paul Miles's article on repentance yet?
No.
I want to send that to you and get your view on it. Well, go ahead.
So this idea with is like you change your mind, but you're changing it in a particular directedness. You're aligning your what does Paul say? Let the disposition of Christ be in you, or let the have the mind of Christ. This sort of language, where you're aligning your thoughts with God, or your will with the God's will. Like all
right, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So he's. I hear you. Finish your thought. You were in mid sentence. Sorry.
No, it's I think the idea of this idea of alignment is one that I think needs more attention than it receives.
Okay. So he's quoting R.C. Trench in his classic Synonyms of the New Testament, cites a passage from Plutarch in which two murderers who, having spared a child, afterward repented, metanoia sin, and tried to slay it. He also cites another instance in which metaleia, another word for repent, also used in the New Testament, is used in the same sense of repenting of something good to do something bad. Notice that both these examples involve a change of mind about something good, not about sin. After the repentance, sinful things were done. So let me bring up the book, Synonyms, and we'll go from synonyms to the actual Plutarch thing, because I think I got Plutarch.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is like it can just mean what it can just mean something like that, and you don't want it. Yeah, I mean, surely Jesus isn't saying, I want you guys to murder more. Like that would be like a strange result. So I think you have to you need to give attention to the fact that there's also this idea of because really you need to look at I guess like my answer to all of these questions is read the Septuagint. Talks about like returning, circumcise your heart, that sort of stuff.
It's not giving me a link to that. I wonder why. It's saying no resources.
Yeah, you could just say I had an afterthought. It can be even for stuff that is not good or bad. Like I had an afterthought and I decided to eat ice cream instead of broccoli. So
Plutarch. Can you hear me, Howdy?
yes.
Okay. I'm trying to find out in my library where Plutarch is. ARCH. Plutarch. Okay, I got Plutarch over here. I got all of these resources, but I don't know which one it is. So look at the name. Okay, the trench. It's Sep. It's weird. It's not. It usually when it will give you the definition. Oh, it does. Plutarch, the dinner of the 7 wise men. 21, and this is on the delay of divine vintage. So, yeah, they're in Greek, and so I don't know which one it is. Let me look for the word sept. Let me just type in Plutarch with an S. Septem Sanctium English. There's the Greek. I'm thinking this is it. Yeah, I need to figure out a better way to get access to that. Maybe if I use the Logos Study Assistant, it can get me there. Let's try that.
Yeah, you should do a concordance in the Septuagint, because I think it's glossing Nahum, right? Where it's talking about a return or a relenting, or
where does Plutarch talk about repentance of a murderer? That should be close enough. And the De Sera Numna Vindicta, on the delay of divine justice, Plutarch explores why the gods delay punishment. One answer presents God's wish to give time for repentance. Okay. He also distinguishes between those who are incurable and require transformation. So this is, let's see where this takes me. That's to the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics. Yeah, I'll have to figure it out later on how to better access it. I have Plutarch, but I don't know how to access it, which I have done before. I just don't remember how to do it. All right, let's get back to the thing.
My work, that is evidence of Christ's work.
Right.
And I don't think it can be.
You met the standard, and good for you. Listen, I am glad you met the standard. Congratulations.
I don't even know what that means. It is objectively not meeting the standard. And frankly, let me be very blunt here. If you believe that the evidence of the turning away from general sin is not in any way evidence of faith, then you are simply saying, I have on a whim just.
And once again, he contradicted himself, because earlier he talked about repenting and before salvation.
Decided that I think this is true. I might not actually even believe it's true. I might not have any repentance in me whatsoever. I might not have any trust. I've just simply vocalized the words, as Charles.
So this is a straw man. Notice this about vocalizing the words. You're not saved by vocalizing words. You don't have to tell anyone that you believe the gospel. Now, this honk for Jesus thing was when SDA Jamie set up the conversation in this way to get his soundbite. And CJ has just been using this. He used it in our debates. You know, CJ's a snake.
Charles Jennings has said you could honk for Jesus in a drunken stupor. And if it was genuine for 5.
If you're drunk and you can understand the gospel, then yes, you can be saved. But a lot of times people are too drunk or too high to be able to understand anything.
Seconds, it doesn't matter if you go back to your Mardi Gras debaucheries and die as a voodoo atheist. You're still saved. You don't have assurance. Not only do you not have assurance, you don't even believe Christ is risen. How can you have assurance in that case if you don't even?
So this is the problem. And I've talked to Wilkin about this, is I believe that you should run the concept of assurance through the chart. And at that time I was using a 3-column chart. And I was like, there's a positional assurance, which is what you believe initially in salvation. And then there's an experiential assurance, which is the perspective of you, whether you think you're saved or not. And so a person that is not in fellowship with God, a person that has apostatized and they're living this way, and and ignoring the fact that they believed at one point in time, or they stopped believing and, like I said, became a voodoo or whatever, that person doesn't have assurance in their walk. All right. Now, here's the thing. There are some people that they can say, you know what? I given myself over to this sin, and I recognize that if I believe at one point in time I'm saved, I'm good to go. I got my fire insurance, and those people have assurance. Okay. They have assurance that where they're going to go. But what they don't have assurance of is that they're in good terms with God. They could say, well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go to heaven anyway. I don't care about rewards. They can give some selfish response like that, but they don't have assurance that God is guiding them in their life, that they're hearing from the Holy Spirit, that there's any purpose in their life, that they're using a spiritual gift, and they're missing out on tons of blessings from God, good things and intimacy with God. I think we need to start talking about different types of assurances, and that might clear up some of the conversation.
I have something on that.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So there's it is ambiguous. In one sense, you could ask, you could say, are you certain? And that could mean you could someone say, well, what if the Bible's wrong? Then are you saved? And I guess right. On that kind of factual, I guess not. But you have right. It's unfortunate that I have to use this word, but this is the word used. Technically, it's called conditional. If what Jesus said is true, then I'm assured that whatever. And even an unbeliever could, I guess, believe that. They would just believe that the antecedent is false.
Right.
So they could have the same sort of conditional assurance of that if what Jesus said is true, then I'm assured that P. Okay.
Yeah.
And in a sense, that's sort of what I take faith to mean. When it says faith in Jesus is I just take it as just believe what he said, sort of. I don't know, all this, people treat it really mystical and whatever, but it's just
this person says, I recommend attending Eastern Orthodox Church. Yeah, everybody that comes by recommends that. That's y'all's way of evangelism. I understand that. I'll give you a wrench whenever I find you. I can't see the chats right now because I don't want to get bogged down, but I will find you.
The last thing before we move on from metanoia is how it's used in the Septuagint. It's usually like a change of direction, and not even like a mental attitude. It's just turn to the left or the right, or turn to the Red Sea. But it's used, that imagery of direction is used sort of as a figure of speech when God he'll often say, "Return to me." You can't walk to God literally. But
I think. Go ahead.
I'm about to end. I think the New Testament authors, a lot of their usage of terms is shaded by the Septuagint, and that's really that's a well that we should draw on to better understand what they're trying to communicate.
Yeah. I have papers on a biblical theology of repentance that I wrote from Genesis, and I'm working through Septuagint and other things like that. So, I found the similar things that I wrote about in my paper.
I don't even believe that Christ is truly the risen God. It's completely asinine and totally ridiculous.
So the first thing I would say is that the Bible itself says that you take the Pharisees, they did all kind of turning, and yet which ones do they turn from? This is the problem. You never know. No, turning from sin isn't evidence of faith, because you can turn from sin and still not believe in Jesus. Witness Matthew chapter 7, as you yourself would say. Second of all,
right, and so there is a possibility of Wilkins' view, turn and live, both before salvation or after salvation, but it has nothing to do with salvation.
I think he's making a mistake here, actually, like a formal mistake about what constitutes evidence. He said that turning from sin is not evidence because you can turn from sin and be unsaved. So this is just misunderstanding what the meaning of evidence is. Again, formally, evidence just is a fact, like a state of affairs or the way that the world is.
Okay.
So you have a hat on. That's a fact.
Yeah. Right.
So the example is the example that is used in the literature is that of it's raining and the ground is wet. So the ground is wet is a fact. Now there's a hypothesis that it rained, and the ground is wet is evidence for the hypothesis that it rained. Why? Because when it rains, it raises the probability that the ground is wet, because the ground being wet is expected on that hypothesis. If the ground, but here's the thing: it can be wet and it not having rained, and the ground can be dry and it had rained. It doesn't exclude the. So if I find water on the ground, that doesn't entail that, because there's other hypotheses that could explain that or accommodate that data. Maybe maybe someone had a fire hydrant. Maybe someone was watering their lawn way too much, or something else could have happened that made the ground wet. That doesn't mean just because there's another. So evidence can be evidence for more than one hypothesis. So the ground being wet raises the probability of both it having rained and there wasn't a fire hydrant burst, and it raises the probability of the hypothesis that it did not rain and there was a fire hydrant that burst. Okay. So just because it could be that the evidence, just because someone can bear fruit and be unsaved, does not negate the fact that whoever C.J. Cox's lights, that fruit of the Spirit is evidence of salvation, because it's just probability raising. It's not.
Okay.
But I think the point he should press is that if you look at your life, if you don't minimize your sin and maximize your fruit of the Spirit, and you sort of objectively look at yourself, you would conclude that you're damned.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this. What words should Chris use to describe what he's talking about?
I think he's articulating himself correctly. I just think he's wrong. Just because something, he's saying, well, the ground could be wet and it not having rained, so therefore the ground being wet is not evidence for the hypothesis that it rained. That's what he's saying, but that's false. That's like trivially false.
Okay.
Maybe he did not mean to say that, but I think that is what he meant to say, and he articulated himself clearly, but he's in error.
Well, all right.
Well, I say things that are in error sometimes. Just
Well, they're also this is a more heated discussion, and so I can understand if the exactness falls off in certain areas. Like last night, I mean, there was times I was sharp, but there's other times I wasn't sharp. I just physical fatigue really got me in that one, but dehydration probably too. But regardless.
Well, I think he understands that what I'm saying. I think on reflection, and like if I spoke to him, he wouldn't argue with me on this, because I talked to him before about this is technically called Bayesian analysis or reasoning, where you're taking hypotheses and evidence. And so the Bayesian framework is P of E given H is equal to P of H given E over whatever. It's what I'm saying is stuff that I think he would have no problem.
And so P of H is a probability of hypothesis.
Yeah, the probability of the hypothesis is equal to the probability of the hypothesis given the evidence over the probability of the evidence.
Okay.
So
I'm starting to understand. That's scary.
Yeah. So I had said this. I think I said this way time ago. Is
Yeah, you have, but that doesn't mean I understood it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but the example where it might come in handy for you is
buckets, right?
It's actually the argument that at the next debate, I think that if you do the Steve Gregg debate, it's the argument that he uses. It's if this context is about the lake of fire, so suppose that if you didn't abide, then you're thrown into the lake of fire. We would expect the authors to mention that. The example that I think Chris likes to say is if I tell my kid that there's not to go into the street,
right?
You would say, well, don't go into the street because your car's going to hit you and you're going to die. Because the child might say, well, he just doesn't want me to. He doesn't like me being in the street for whatever reason, and it's not really going to pull on him. But if you explain, no, this is why, then that motivates the person not to do it.
Right.
You're sort of giving them motivation not to do. So for example, when Paul says, don't do X, Y, Z, and then he gives them an explanation, like don't present yourselves as your members to sin. Don't you know that you were purchased with a price? He gives at least 15 or 20 arguments without mentioning the lake of fire. Now, suppose that it was the case that if you did not, if you presented yourself as members to sin and death, that you would be thrown into the lake of fire. It would be expected that he would mention that. So, for example, the hypothesis is sin, or I don't know how you'd phrase it, but the hypothesis is that what he's talking about is referring to the lake of fire. And then we have the data, the evidence, and that's what he wrote. Now, the question is it more expected that if this is about the lake of fire, that he would mention it?
Okay.
So yes, obviously, that's more expected. But again, by what's called evidential parity, that means the absence of that data is evidence against the hypothesis.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's sort of the argument that I think he uses in the next debate. If you watch it. I just wanted to say, I think that he understands what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
What he said here was false, but I don't think he would argue with what I'm saying now because it's similar to what he says later, and I've talked to him a little bit about this. So I don't think he's in error. Like I just want to clarify that.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. It helps me understand things better. So what we're kind of talking about is I don't know if this is the right word, predictability. If you have a hypothesis, what can you predict based off of that hypothesis? You know, what do you expect to find if this hypothesis is true?
Yeah.
Is that essentially what we're doing?
So a hypothesis is you can think of it as sort of like an explanation. It's sort of like just another fact, just like remember I said there's data and facts that count as evidence for the hypothesis. Usually the hypothesis is also another fact. So like again, it's the same example over and over. It rained today is a hypothesis. Now there's what's called evidence for that hypothesis. So for example,
the ground is wet. Yeah.
There's the sky is cloudy. There's I don't know what else other evidence there would be.
Rainbow, maybe.
Yeah. Or moisture in the air. So these are what's called evidence because they increase the probability of the hypothesis.
Okay.
So actually, is it okay if I just share my screen? Because I think this is maybe...
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I can make openings in the future that are using this stuff. I think it's starting to make sense. Just I've been kind of concerned. It's like I don't want to try some of this stuff and misrepresent it. So I want to be very careful, you know. But yeah, share your screen, Howdy. Let's see, which one is it? Present or invite? I guess this is you.
Notepad.
Add to stage. It says untitled.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just gonna I'm just making sure I'm getting this exactly right because I don't want to make any mistake. Just give me one more minute. P. Okay. So there's a rule called Bayes' rule, and that is P of H given E is equal to P of E given H times the probability of P of H. And this is all divided by P of E. Now, P of E, I'll have to define these, or P of H given E is defined as probability of hypothesis given evidence.
Okay.
Actually, let me stretch this out a little bit more. And then there's P of E given H. P of H is probability hypothesis, and P of E is probability of evidence. So it's saying that the probability of the hypothesis given the evidence is equal to the probability of the evidence given the hypothesis times the probability of the hypothesis divided by the probability of the evidence. There's other ways of saying this. This is also called the what do they call it? Let me double check. Yeah, this is the posterior. This is called the posterior. This is called the prior. This is called the likelihood. And this is called, I'm spelling that wrong. How do you say it? Likelihood. And this is just generally just evidence. Or so I don't know how to explain how this works. Let me think of a way to say it. So the general idea is something like what happens is you have different numbers for each of these hypotheses. So for example, we have hypothesis 1. It rained today. And then you have hypothesis 2. It did not rain today. And let's say you have prior probabilities for whatever reason. Like let's say it's 50-50. So we have P of H1 is equal to 50% or 0.5. P of H2 is equal to 0.5. And then we have the probability of the ground being wet. Or let me see the evidence. Say E1. The ground is wet. And so we have P of E1. So what's the general probability that the ground is wet? Pretty low, probably like like 1% of the time the ground is wet. And then we have, what is P of E given H? This is essentially what is the probability of the ground is wet given it rained. Pretty high. So if it rained, it's pretty likely that the ground is wet. So it's something like, I don't know, like 90% at least.
Mhm.
And then you have P of, oh, sorry, this is H1 and E1. But then you have P of E1 given H2. So what's the probability that the ground is wet given that it rained? Maybe even less, like 0.005. And so what we can do, we have all the numbers that we need to make this calculation now, because all we need is P of EH, P of H, and P of E. And that's how we calculate the posterior probability. This is called updating on the evidence. This is a norm of reasoning. You're sort of obligated to update on evidence to be rational. This is called a norm of rationality. So if you don't do this, you're unrational, or not, or you're irrational, or not rational, depending on the circumstance. Okay, so we can say that P of H1 given E1 is equal to, and then we just plug it in, P of E given H, which is 0.9 times probability of H, which is 0.5, divided by P of E. So this is divided by P of E, so it's divided by 0.01. So if you have a calculator, we can do this. I'll put it into Google and see what it says.
How old is this Bayesian analysis?
Yeah. This is called Bayes rule. This is Bayesian analysis or Bayesianism.
So how long's it been around?
Since Bayes. Let me see. Bayes. Reverend Thomas Bayes. I think he was an Anglican. Let me double check.
Wow. I thought this guy was a mathematician or philosopher, and
well, what's happened is it might not seem like it now, but actually throughout all of history up until about 100 years ago, every scholar was also very religious. So most of the people are going to be priests or bishops or stuff like that. Those are the only learned people because they're the only ones like reading, because books, it's hard to get access to. It's hard to become literate. It's hard to have access to this sort of stuff. So yeah, all of the philosophers, all of the scientists, Francis Bacon, all of these guys are just bishops and deacons and people who have that. So he is actually a Presbyterian minister in Sheffield. So we got a presbyter on our hands.
Calvinist.
So eventually you get something like probability of H is less than P of H plus the evidence. And so it rained is more likely given the evidence that, I mean, it's sort of like, I mean, it sounds like maybe an overway of formalization of what seems like pretty simple, but so it rained is more likely given that the ground is wet. So maybe this is up to like it rained was probability. Actually, it isn't 50-50 because it actually doesn't rain more likely than it rains. I forget what it would be. So maybe it rains like 10% of the time.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. You have to keep that in mind. The priors. You always have to make sure you get the priors correct. So this increases the probability. So ground wet increases probability that it rained, but it might not even increase it up to 50% just because of how unlikely it is prior.
Right. If it's a drought, you know.
Yeah, so even if the ground is wet, it increases the probability, but it could increase it from like 10% to like 30%, for maybe something like 50%, 40. But so just because something is evidence, all it does is like move the needle. It doesn't say it is or that it isn't. So we got to keep that in mind. So how it shows up in these contexts, when if you watch the next video about Steve Gregg, he makes both side makes the argument that this is an argument that I sort of came up with a while ago, is that if this passage is about so here this is the hypothesis. Hypothesis 1. This is about the lake of fire. Hypothesis 2 could be this is about reward. Hypothesis 3, this is about ice cream. And we have all these hypotheses. This is about fellowship. And so we have all these hypotheses, but all of these hypotheses predict stuff. So hypothesis was like, so what do we expect if how did I say it? If sin of a believer risks loss of salvation. Because this is the real emphasis here. Sin of a believer risks loss of salvation. Okay, we have this evidence called the New Testament. This is the data. It's called data. And there's pieces of evidence, like E1. We could say a verse or like a sentence.
Okay.
This is called a datum. So data is the plural, datum is the singular. So the New Testament has a lot of data. No, it has a lot of datums. It has a lot of data, but each individual would be a piece of datum. Okay. If H1 we would expect X, Y, Z. So for example, Paul would mention the lake of fire. So it's, is it strange that sin of a believer risks loss of salvation and being cast to like, well, instead of because of loss of salvation, that can mean different things, because Steve Gregg says, there's different salvations. So maybe
Right. Yeah.
Being cast into the lake of fire risks, and I'll change that here to thrown into a lake of fire. And same up there. And Paul does not mention this while arguing reasons why a believer should not sin. Yeah, that's the question. Is it strange that sin of a believer risks being cast into the lake of fire, And Paul does not mention this while arguing reasons why a believer should not sin, because it seems like. So here's the thing: being thrown into the lake of fire is not desired. The risk of being thrown into the lake of fire would motivate someone. Actually, there's a more precise way of saying this. It would be if sin of believer risks lake of fire, and lake is not desired by believers. Not by any, it's probably not desired by anyone, but for this argument, to be not desired by believers, then informing someone that sin of a believer risks lake of fire would motivate that believer not to sin. Something like this. I mean, I haven't really I could probably be put more formally, but I think this is enough for now.
Okay.
So if sin of a believer risks lake of fire, and lake of fire is not desired by believers, then informing someone that sin of a believer risks lake of fire would motivate. So here's the idea. You don't want to be thrown into the lake of fire. It's horrible. And if you sin, you're liable to get thrown in there. So if I want you not to sin, it's pertinent for me to inform you of that fact.
Right.
That your path leads to the lake of fire.
Okay.
So Paul not mentioning lake of fire is expected on the hypothesis that sin of a believer is not, how would they say it? Sin of a believer is not, whatever. Yeah, that's, I'm sort of doing this offhand. This is the general idea. Is Paul does not mention lake of fire. This is one piece of evidence. Paul does not mention lake of fire. Now the question is, hypothesis one.
So what you're telling me is when people say, "Oh, well, that's an argument of silence," or the absence of evidence isn't what is it? Proof of absence.
Absence of evidence is an evidence of absence. That's a phrase, and that is also false. Yes, absolutely. Absence of evidence is evidence of absence. That's what evidential. So let me mention this. This is really important. It's called evidential parity. If E is evidence for H, if and only if, not E. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say if. E is evidence for H, if and only if, not E is evidence for not H.
Another hypothesis, in other words.
No. E is evidence. No, but E is evidence specifically against that hypothesis.
Okay, yeah.
So if this is expected and you don't have it, then that lowers the probability of it.
Wow. I wish I would have understood this stuff so that I could have, did my debate different last night.
So the hypothesis is sin, or let's just say apostasy, or apostasy well, I shouldn't. No, I'll just say because I don't think Paul talks about apostasy too much, but he does talk about sin all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
We have this evidence. Paul does not mention lake of fire. Here's hypothesis one. if then like a fire. Hypothesis 2 is just the negation of hypothesis 1, so not if then like a fire. Now,
now you're doing the probability of H1 and H2, right?
yeah, you could say, okay, what's the prior probability of H1? Even if it's high, like let's say, even if there's like, if they're 90% sure that they're correct, that if then like a fire, then H2 would be 0.1. Oh, this is another very important one. This is another rule, or not another rule, but so Bayes' rules comes what's called from the probability axioms, and one of them is like sum to 1. So if you have H and you have not H, then they have to sum to 1. So if I'll say not H and H. So if you have H is 90%, then not H has to be 10% because probability has to sum to 1.
Okay.
So if something is 90% the case, that means it's 10% that it's not the case, or whatever it is. Because you can't have more than 100% probability.
Right.
Okay, then we have, I should say P of H is equal to 0.9, and P of not H is equal to 0.1. So even if they're, this is what's called their priors. So everyone has priors. So this is the way the world works according to this framework.
So if I've had exegetical debates on particular passages, right, and in those debates I've demonstrated that my hypothesis is correct, would those previous debates be considered priors?
So this is how you're, so like how sure of you are of things. Like it's hard to assign, like it's really hard to put numbers on these things, but just for the sake of argument, you could say like maybe Charles is like 95% the free grace is true, or the 99 that the Trinity is true. But maybe there's some things that he's not sure of. I remember you had that thing where it says these I'm pretty firm on.
Right.
Dispensational, maybe you're like 90%, and then maybe there's things that you're premillennial. And you have some, I don't know, 90% or whatever. And then you have some things that are less than that, but you have, this is equal to 0.95. This percent just means divide by 100.
0.99.
And
0.90.
And these are called your priors. So
is prior meaning prior commitment?
It's so this is Bayesian epistemology, is when you take this and you say we do this in terms of our beliefs. So instead of hypothesis, we say belief, and credence. So we have, because you don't believe all things equally. Some things you believe more, and something. So
right.
It's sort of like this gradient where you don't want to say like you believe 95%, but
right.
We have what's called credence, and these are called credences. And so
is credence like weight? Like you give weight?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, your credence, you give something. So when you enter a debate, Charles debates free grace, and let's say you walk into this with the free grace prior of 95%. That's the credence you have in your free grace. Because I mean, maybe it's even 99, but you can't have a probability of 1 for stuff like this.
Okay, yeah, because you can't be absolutely certain.
Yeah, and there's more. There's very important reasons why you can't be why you can't. So suppose a probability of free grace is equal to 1. That means no matter what evidence you're given, this can't change.
Right.
So then,
and if it can't change, it's not falsifiable.
Well, it can be unfalsifiable. Well, the reason why probability, no, you can, no, because you can have unfalsifiable things that are very unlikely or that you don't
Okay.
believe. But the reason why you don't want to assign a credence of one, or suppose Charles has credence of 1 in pre-grace, then no evidence can disconfirm his pre-grace belief. Then debating is misguided because debating, you're sort of presupposing that people are presenting arguments and evidence, and arguments you can interpret as a form of evidence on this analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Debating, you could say, presupposes possibility of changing minds.
Mm.
So if you are debating, cannot assign 1 to.
In my early debates, I used to say I can change my mind, and if I can't change my mind, what are we debating for? You know,
Right.
That's what I said. But then people are like, "Oh, you're not going to change your mind in the middle of a debate." Maybe not in the middle of debate, but maybe after reflection, after further study of what was, in the debate, it's possible. It is possible for me to change my mind in certain areas.
Well, change your mind in what sense? You might not disbelieve free grace, but you could certainly change your. So suppose you have a debate and I'm walking into the debate, you're like 95% sure that free grace is true, but your interlocutor, let's say Bob, presents very persuasive arguments that
lower the probability that free grace is true.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or evidence that not free grace.
Mm-hmm.
After debating, Charles updates on this evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And then free grace is something like 0.94%. And this should happen. You might not change, but you should at least be at least somewhat sensitive. I mean, even if it's like 0.94999999, like you should feel something. Like it's very unlikely that you're just totally insensitive to.
Right.
And that's how it works. Is you have priors. So you have priors of Christianity being true, of you having 2 hands. You have all your beliefs. All the beliefs you have now are called priors. And
okay.
So right now you have all these prior beliefs. As you experience the world, you are presented evidence. We update on this evidence. So this is how Bayesians this is their framework for reasoning. You have all your beliefs. You're met with evidence, and then you update. That doesn't mean you change. That doesn't mean suddenly you don't believe Christianity is true, that free grace is false, or anything like that. But you're constantly updating and adjusting your credences and of belief in each proposition.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how. And then, okay, what is? And then all you have to know is what is evidence, and then it's this sort of thing. That things that are more likely given the hypothesis.
Okay.
And that's reasoning. That's what reasoning is. Or one main aspect of. Some people think all reasoning is just this. So, maybe that was a bit.
No, I as bad as I suck at math, I understood that, you know.
Yeah, the specific numbers don't even really matter. It's just
Yeah, they're symbolic of weight, I guess you could say. Okay.
But then I just want to reiterate why he's wrong when he said that.
Yeah, go ahead. You want me to remove your screen or keep it on? Okay.
So
I think Chris is in the chat. Golfside says, back up and use a more intuitive example around updating beliefs. Multiply by the posterior to get a new posterior. It's a general method, but a prior of one makes it impossible to update.
Yes. You want to be able to update, otherwise you're dogmatic in a way that makes debating. Then you shouldn't be debating. Like, why are you debating?
Yeah.
Why are you reasoning? There's nothing to reason because you can't change your mind about it. If it's one, then you don't even need to think anymore. You can just, I believe what I believe.
Yeah. Let me say something to Chris real quick. Chris, if you're available tonight, I'll react to my debate with Kevin over Matthew 7. Because I believe you'll be objective and fair. I don't think you agree with me or Dillo, but it would still be good for you to get your eyes on it and help see what unfolds. I know you got church tomorrow, but I can go live pretty fast. I can end this stream and go live. So, but if you don't do that, then I'm going to go over your Steve Gregg debate, and you can join that one too if you want. But let me know what you would like to do. Would you like to be there for the review of Steve Gregg, or would you like to be there for the Matthew 7, or you got to sit both out, this time?
So I'll give a more intuitive example because I know that this probably won't hit you as much, but it'll be more intuitive for people that. Well, you live with. Do you live with anyone, or you do live alone?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. And I assume you have a fridge in your house with like food and stuff in it?
Yes.
Okay.
So who ate the ice cream? Is that where you're going with?
No. Let's say you have
Okay.
Let me ask you this really quickly. Is there ice cream in your fridge right now?
No, if it was, I'd be eating it.
So you have what's called a prior belief that there is not ice cream in your fridge, and this
Right.
is and how what percent would you like? Are you like 99%?
Well, I think this relates to updating. Last time I checked, there was not ice cream in the fridge. I'm the only one with a car, and therefore the likelihood of there being no ice cream in the fridge is pretty high, unless somebody brought ice cream to us that I didn't know about.
Yeah, you might say like 98%.
You say tomorrow night would be better for me. I have to finish prep for tomorrow. 2 sermons and a couple of songs I have to learn. Yeah, I know Saturdays are tough. So okay, if you tell me I get home from church probably around 7:30 Central. So let me know what you would like to do. Would you like to do the Steve Gregg, or would you like to do the Matthew 7? And I will set up a stream for whichever one you want and a time. Just let me know.
Is it okay if I ask you who you live with for this example, or is it too personal?
Well, I could tell you privately, and yeah, I don't.
It's because like, let's just say
Just
let's just
make
use someone else as an example. Let's just say like you're with your wife or somewhere, and then
okay.
Your wife tells you she bought ice cream. So we have to do this thing called updating. Where we take.
Yeah. She updated you.
Yeah. And we
she could be joking. She could still be joking to be cruel, She could say psych, But yeah, there's a high probability, that's really interesting because that actually wouldn't that go up to 99?
No, because there is not ice cream in the fridge. You're really sure that there's not. But then your wife tells you that she bought ice cream.
So yeah, is she serious? Is she trustworthy? Did she have money? Those factors come into play.
Yeah, but I'm just bracketing all that and saying it
Okay.
increases the probability. So what's the probability of there being ice cream in your fridge? Probability. What's the probability that she says that she bought ice cream when there's ice cream in the fridge? Pretty low.
When there's already ice cream in the fridge? Yeah, it is low because, I mean, if we already have ice cream, why buy more ice cream?
Yeah. So when we do the update, we have to say, well, what's the probability of their ice being in the fridge given the testimony? Because we're updating on this.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do this calculation. It's equal to testimony given, sorry. It's the evidence, given is equal to the testimony. Actually, it's given that there's not ice cream. Sorry. So even I make mistakes. Multiplied by the probability of it's backwards. So what's the probability that there's not ice cream in the probability that there's not ice cream in the fridge given testimony is equal to the probability of the testimony of the probability of the testimony is given when there's not ice cream in the fridge times the probability of not ice cream in fridge, and this is divided by probability of testimony. And then you throw in numbers here, whatever numbers they are, assuming your wife is like veridical and assuming that your wife's testimony raises your credence in any way, which I assume that it would, then the probability of the hypothesis is, or probably the hypothesis given the evidence is greater than the probability of the hypothesis. So this is called confirmation. So, or no. And in this case, the probability of the hypothesis given the evidence is less than the probability of the hypothesis because there's not ice cream in the fridge. That's why I shouldn't have used a negation of the hypothesis. So this would be disconfirmation. So there being ice cream in the fridge is more likely, given that she says it. So the hypothesis of there not being ice cream in the fridge is reduced. So it would be disconfirmation. So you might revise. You might go from, now we have what's called the posterior belief that there is not ice cream in the fridge. And now you might even go down to like 0. Did I do it in percents? Yeah, I did it in percents. It might be like 0.5%. Or let's just say 1% or whatever, because she might have ate it or something. Actually, it might even be 5 because she might have ate it or whatever else.
Yeah.
So we've changed our belief because we had this belief that of 98% that we had that there was no ice cream in the fridge, and then we were presented with this evidence, and then we updated from the prior belief to the posterior belief, and now we think that that's 5% rather than 98%. This is called Bayesian reasoning, and there are norms. Bayesian reasoning. So norms are just rules,
standards.
Yeah, you could say standards of rationality. Mm-hmm. So if you're beliefs in accordance with norms, you're what's called rational.
Mhm.
It's not in accordance with norms, you're called irrational. And that should be enough to have a pretty decent understanding. And then you could do some practice problems or whatever to do. But anyways, he said something that was false. So close
Okay.
side says fruit of spirit is not evidence of, I don't know what we'd say, salvation or regeneration. Or maybe salvation. Now the question, so for that not to be evidence, what that means is that the probability of E given H, the probability of H given E is equal to probability of H. So the probability of salvation given fruit is equal to the probability of salvation. So fruit does not change the probability of the hypothesis of salvation. So then that means fruit is not expected on the hypothesis of salvation, which also means that the probability of fruit is equal to the probability of fruit given salvation. So fruit is not expected on the hypothesis of salvation. I don't think he intends to say that, because that's like really bizarre, because
Right. I mean,
you have to expect, even though it's not guaranteed, it's still more expected.
right. Yeah.
But he said you can be an unbeliever with fruit. This is not an argument for non-evidential status. Let me put it down here. Of fruit for belief. And it's pretty obvious why this is true, because just by counterexamples. So for example, you can have the ground being, or you can have the ground being wet with no rain. So just because you can have E without H. This is like trivial, I guess. That doesn't mean it's not evident. So he's saying you can have E without H implies E is not evidence for H. Well, that's just false, because you can have ground wet without rain. That would mean that ground wet is not evidence of rain. And I don't think he's going to accept that. So that's why I said I think he made a mistake.
Okay.
There
So-
we go.
What word could be added there? I mean, would I say something like this? Fruit is not a sure evidence, a for sure evidence. Could I do something like that?
The second part that he said was, I think, what was correct, and that's what again what so the quote, what to say is, man cannot place one drop of assurance in himself. This is Calvin. Why not? Well, So you're essentially testing yourself to see if you deserve salvation or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
If done objectively, you do not. So, conclusion, you are not saved. That's why it's bad to.
Yeah.
So why is it? So he wants to object. He wants to say there's an objection to fruit. Being evidence for salvation, right? But you can't do this in the sense of a Bayesian analysis because it's like trivially true that fruit is more expected on that hypothesis. But the proper objection is that I remember this is important. Evidential parity. That means lack of fruit is evidence of the negation of the hypothesis. So lack of fruit is evidence of not salvation. This is remember when I said norm, Bayesian norm? This is one of them. This is a Bayesian. So if you don't affirm this, you're being irrational.
Okay.
So if you want to say that fruit is evidence for salvation, you also have to say that lack of fruit is evidence of not salvation.
Okay.
Then the question is, okay, how much fruit do we lack?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have so given the I shouldn't say that. I should say given the total evidence, the salvation hypothesis is low, also like very low. But we have another piece of data. It's called scriptural datum, assurance of the believer. So even though we have all of this fruit of this, because if we look at the fruits, we conclude that probability of salvation, honestly, it's going to be something like 0.0000001%. If you look at yourself objectively, and if the lack of the fruit is evidence of not salvation, this is our prior. Now this is done that after we update on the fruit, this is our new prior. So let's say prior of salvation was like 50-50, like maybe we weren't sure. And then we look at the fruit and we update. Posterior after fruit analysis is like 0. But then we also have a new piece of evidence we can update on. There's a scriptural datum of assurance of the believer. And so now we update again. And this is how I would phrase it. Posterior after finished work of Christ. I don't know, like 9999999999999. So yeah, so fruit is evidence, and you should conclude that you're almost certainly damned. And then you update it on a new evidence, I should say, a posterior after crucifixion, maybe.
Okay.
And then you're assured. Christ is your assurance.
So I'm going to say something, and you tell me how this works. The reason Calvin said that you can't add one drop to your assurance, man can't, is
just really briefly, right before that, he also said all of the assurance is looking at Christ. I think he said that verbatim, but I can double check and get out the quote. But it's something very close to this. This is
okay.
John Calvin.
All right. Now that may refute what I'm fixing to say, but I'll still say what I was going to say before. So Calvin is making the argument that a human cannot trust their assurance by looking at themselves.
No, they
But
would be because if you do that objectively, you're certainly damned. Well, I shouldn't say
Right.
certainly, because certainly is like one, but you're very, 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 very likely to be damned.
Okay.
Updating on that evidence.
Now, here's an additional datum. Okay. Irresistible regeneration, the gift of faith, and monogenism. If monogenism is true, then you can you have assurance because God is the one doing everything in you.
Well, it's easy to have assurance. The question is the assurance rational?
Mm.
Like you can be, because people are very easily irrational. So for example, and when Chris debated CJ Cox and that other guy, they said, actually,
Wait.
I am a person.
Mm-hmm.
So posterior after truth analysis, they would say, yeah, I looked at myself and I came to the conclusion that I'm actually like 99%. Or sorry, let me do this right. This would be delusional.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very easy to have assurance. It's a little bit more difficult to be rationally assured. So you might want to. So you could argue that you're assured, but your assurance is delusional because if you evaluated your fruit and your lack of fruit objectively, you would conclude that you're not saved. But you can't say that because of your system. But so the question is, what gives the believer assurance? Is it fruit inspection, or is it this?
Well, here's the issue with this. Let's say you're currently looking to Christ, but pretend like you have access to this knowledge. You're not the elect, therefore you don't have gift faith. Therefore, you're truly not looking to Christ in faith, independence, and therefore you're not saved.
Let me write that down.
Okay.
So say that again.
Okay. At first, all right. So we're starting with that your behavior right now is you're looking at Christ. Okay.
Okay.
And then we're going to assume that you have access to the knowledge that you're not the elect.
That you're not the elect.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And therefore you cannot be regenerated through irresistible grace and given the gift of faith.
Okay.
This means that you cannot be looking to Christ in faith. Therefore, you logically can't have assurance from looking to Christ.
Yeah, you can ask. Maybe you could phrase it in a question. Can they would probably, can an unbeliever have assurance? Well, how would because they sort of use different words for what is their word for someone who falls away, or can they? No, can a non-elect? That's what it.
Can the non-elect have assurance of salvation?
They would say yes, I think.
Yeah, they would say because Satan can make you think you're saved.
Yeah, this is like delusional assurance. But obviously, like objectively, no, because
right.
But non-elect means no salvation on their view.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, So no. So it's yes in the sense of like their subjective assurance, but no in the sense of like maybe no objectively, and
Okay.
maybe yes subjectively.
Yes, subjectively, no, objectively.
Yeah, something
But
like
but that's still delusion, right? If it's subjective and it's not. Okay.
because yeah.
Okay. So all right, now that there's this argument. Now let me try another argument that I've used, but so you ready? You ready for this one?
Okay.
All right. So God is perfect. Everything God does is perfect. If God gives you the gift of faith, then you will perfectly persevere. Perfectly persevering is sinless perfectionism. However, because your position does not logically lead or to sinless perfectionism, as you claim, your system doesn't follow. Now, what they'll say is, well, we still have a sin nature. That's what they'll say. So, yeah, we have a sin nature. Now, at this point, what I would say is God has caused people to withhold people from sinning, like Abimelech. God can cause you, God can prevent you from sinning. Okay?
So it's like overcomes the sin nature is what you're saying?
Yes. All right. A perfect God would perfectly persevere you, sinless perfectionism, and therefore prevent you from sinning. So even if you say you have a sin nature, it doesn't do away with the fact that because God can prevent you from sinning, that it would lead to sinless perfectionism if he actually did that. Then the other argument is this, is that if God does not prevent you from sinning, whose fault is it? Now, of course, they're going to talk about compatibilism usually. Yeah, or God is the one to blame, you know?
Blameworthy.
Yeah. So what do you think of that one?
There's a lot. One thing is I want to talk about. So one way of making an argument is what's called a reductio.
Argument to absurdity? Yeah.
Or reductio for short. So you have some premise one. P, and then you have P2 is like Q implies not P, P3, Q, conclusion 1, not P, conclusion 2, P and not P, contradiction. This is sort of the form of this is a form of argument. Okay. So when you do a reductio, then you can, what you're doing is you're taking beliefs and putting them as propositions, and then you derive a contradiction from them with, this is called deductive reasoning.
Okay.
And this is sort of the form of it. Okay, what's the point of this? Well, most everyone affirms what's called the LNC. Formally, this is what's called a logical truth. So from any set or the empty set of propositions, you can derive not P and not P. So C2. So therefore C2 is false. But we derived it from these. But you can't derive, but valid deductive inference. These are called inferences. Technically, this is modus implies ponens, and technically this is called addition. This is modus ponens of P2 and P3, and this is addition of P1 and C1. So if I have P and I have not P, then it's valid to put them together and say P and not P. That's a valid rule of inference called addition. And then there's another one that if P implies Q and you have P, then you can conclude Q. That's called modus ponens. That's also valid. The thing about valid deductive inferences is that are truth preserving. So truth preserving just means if premises are true, then conclusions are true. But this conclusion is false. Therefore, one or more premises is false. So we have C2 is false. That means P1 or P2 or P3 is false. So the goal of a reductio is to say from your set of beliefs there's a contradiction, therefore one of your beliefs must be wrong. And so S is forced on pain of incoherence to abandon one or more beliefs. That's the goal of a deductive argument. But you can use it on yourself to make yourself have more coherent beliefs. So you could formalize what you said here and make it valid. And then there's two ways of responding. Generally, you can say, I reject P1 or P2 or P3, or there's a term in the argument that equivocates. So for example, anything or nothing is better than heaven. P2, a burger is better than nothing. Conclusion, a burger is better than heaven.
Okay, yeah, you're equivocating on nothing.
Yeah, so you don't like. Sometimes you reject a premise, and sometimes you say what's called I distinguish. You can say this is what you say in response to a. If you want to resist a valid deductive argument, you have usually two options. There's more, but generally it's just either going to be reject a premise or what's called distinguishing a term. So for example, there's all arguments generally going to have a certain kind of form of syllogism. You'll have so the conclusion is something like subject predicate of the conclusion. You're going to have, at the end of any argument, you're going to have a conclusion, subject, and conclusion predicate. Now, to derive this, you're going to have the conclusion subject and the conclusion predicate in the premises. So you're going to have the conclusion subject and middle term conclusion predicate. It's generally going to have a certain kind of form in middle term. And then you can either reject a premise or you can distinguish middle term. And then the subject is called or major term or minor term. Conclusion, subject is major, conclusion, predicate is minor, middle term is middle. So that's the two ways. So when you present an argument to them, like let's say you presented your argument about that, either they're going to reject one of these, or they're going to say that the argument equivocates either on perfect or everything or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So they might reject that perfectly persevering is sinless. They're probably going to reject. I think most of them would reject this premise that if God gives the gift of faith, then He will perfectly persevere.
Well, if God is doing the work and everything God does is perfect, then God will not fail in doing the work.
Yeah, but they have
preventing sin.
Yeah, but they usually emphasize like the sovereignty of God. So Calvin would say something like, even all the evil in the world is God sort of wrote it. There's what do they say?
What's Chris talking about here?
Mood and figure. Barbara is a valid form of Aristotelian syllogism. So,
okay,
just
revisiting first semester logic class is such fun.
Yeah. So there's four figures. You can have you can have major. I can. Well, hold on. Let me see if I have it on hand. I probably don't, but yeah, there's four figures, and then some of them are valid, some of them are invalid. So Aristotelian syllogisms are called categorical and predicate. So, and they're also quantification logic. So you have, so it has is and are as a logical, or as a, so it has is and are. So it's a predicate logic, but it also has all and none and some. So you can say some dogs are blue, some blue things are water. But notice you can't say, from this you can't say some dogs are water.
Right.
But if you had
it limits the scope.
Blue things are water, then dogs are water. This would be valid. So if dogs are blue and blue things are water, then dogs are water. That would be true.
Right. If all blue things are water.
Yeah, so that would be valid if you had what's called the universal quantifier. All dogs are blue. All blue things are water. All dogs are water. See, that's valid. This is valid, but this isn't quantification logic. These are called quantifiers. You'll see like an upside down A. This is called the universal quantifier. Then you'll have a backwards E. This is called the existential. This is like some or all. And then you'll have other logical connectives. And so this is logical negation. There's like not. So it's just ways of going between English and formal symbolic logic. But anyways, so you'll notice that you can add these quantifiers in different. So you can say some dogs are all are blue, or you could say all dogs are some cute, or all cute are some red, or some dog. So there's So there's lots of different ways of placing the quantifiers, and depending on where you place them, the argument's going to be valid or invalid.
So that would be like all dogs are sometimes cute.
Yeah,
or in some way cute. Animals.
or some, I don't know, but I'm going off the top of my head. Anyways, there's 256
Wow.
possible syllogisms, and only about like 20 of them are valid. Because you notice when I said when I was using some and all, you can, depending on where you place them, they're not going to be valid.
Okay.
And there's like rules like middle term has to be distributed, or like if there's an all, then so there's like 5 rules that let you know whether or not they're valid. Barbara is there's mnemonics for different figures. I think Barbara is like all. So if you have all dogs are blue, all blue are water, then all dog are water. That's valid because it's all. So if you do all, that's valid. But if you, depending on how you do it, it's whatever. So there's E, not E, all, not all. Not all dogs are blue. Some blue are not water. Some dogs are not water. Like there's like tons and tons of different ways of there's tons and tons of syllogisms. Most of them are invalid, but
So if I upgrade Super Layman to operate in the ways that you're mentioned right here, it will eliminate some of the possibilities that that I could come up with in my mind, but just are not logically valid or whatever, right?
yeah. What I would say is so to me, most debates aren't really. There's really only some arguments that are, you could say, boilerplate argumental forms. You could have deduction, which is this and this and this and this. You have induction. That's like this apple is sweet, this apple is sweet, this apple is sweet, this apple is sweet. And then you pick up a new apple and you say, this apple will be sweet, from induction.
Yeah. Okay.
And this also comes in like inductive Bible studies. I think, remember that when you, I don't know if you saw at the end of when you canceled it and you were saying, what's the natural reading? I was thinking like, what could that mean? One of the things it could mean is like inductive Bible study, where here it means, here A means B, here A means B, here A means B. So usually A means B. So if we see it, maybe we should defer to A means B rather than A means C. So like, let's say faith means belief, 80%, trust, 10%, entrusted. I mean, I'm just making this up. You could do like your
right.
And you could say probably here. So like, let's say we don't know what it means here. Probably it means believe. That's an inductive argument.
Okay.
This is abductive. It's also known as inference, IBE, or inference to the best explanation. This is virtues. I don't want to talk too much about that. And then the last is Bayesian. Any argument that you run across in academic literature is going to be one of these, almost certainly. Okay. And these are generally considered the only rationally compelling forms of argument, assuming that these are valid. And
so if I can get Super Layman to run all of those, and then kind of like do like a triangulation or triangulating of it? I mean, do you think that would be a good thing to do?
I would say just like it. I mean, maybe it sounds like what I'm saying is like overwhelming, but really like just this is essentially like it's just this. Like there's not more to it than this. Like we've essentially covered almost all the arguments that you could possibly ever make.
Well, seeing how it's done doesn't mean I could duplicate it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I would say because you're always you say something like I am bored with these opponents. The thing is, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. So, for example, if me and you were debating on SFT,
oh yeah, I would be cooked.
You got this 20-minute opening presentation. I would say something like, "That was interesting. If you have an argument, I would be willing to look at it." And then you're probably not going to be able to make an argument. And I would just say in my conclusion, Charles did not make any argument for his position. Therefore, no one is rationally compelled to believe his position. And I wouldn't have to do anything more than that. This is how you would be responded to if you were writing in philosophy of religion literature. You would do your presentation, and they would say, "That's not an argument. Do you have an argument?" And if you don't, then okay. Because there's like rational norms. So believe things, changing mind absent rational norms is irrational. Only these arguments are rationally compelling. So changing belief or opinion because of this speech is irrational. I'm not irrational, so I'm not changing my belief or opinion. That's how it would go. So if you want to compel someone rationally, because you can compel someone non-rationally by what's called like persuasion, non-rational motivation. So you can be motivated irrationally, but to someone who's not sensitive to that, like let's say like I'm only interested in rational motivation. Do you have any of that? Then that would sort of shut the conversation down pretty quickly. So I think, I mean, I maybe I sound crazy because like I understand like no one else does any of this, but this is just how I see it, you know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that, can you hear me, Adam?
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep losing the internet when it comes back, but I was listening on my phone. I want to improve in my own reasoning and my own thinking, and I do want to get close to what you're saying and what you're doing, so that I can, if the situation arises, you know, I can perform at that at an approximation of that level. So
bad. I will say why it's good is it what would convince me might not be what convinces or what would convince academic analytical philosophers might not be what convinces certainly like the average person. I mean, even really like even your interlocutors or people who argue this all the time, you're gonna if you gave them like a Bayesian argument, they're not even going to understand what you're saying. So
right.
As a matter of fact, like rational arguments aren't going to have an effect on most of the people you speak to or the audience. So It's
So-
unfortunate because of the two communities. So like, what would be convincing to someone isn't what's convincing to someone else. So I'm not even sure.
Got you. Okay. So let me ask you this question. Yeah, often you tell me that I don't have an argument.
Yeah.
What do I have? What am I doing in my debates? Let me know that. It's totally transparent. What am I doing? What would you call what I'm doing whenever I make a debate opening?
I mean, maybe like giving like a persuasive speech.
Okay. So what
Maybe like
would
a
happen?
rhetorical flourish, something like that.
Okay. So what would make it an argument?
Well, to be an argument is to be one of these.
Okay.
But the problem is like when you do an art, because Gulfside does this sometimes. Well, he'll say P1, P2, P3. Like he'll make an argument, and then interlocutor's eyes sort of glaze over, disinterested, insensitive. So sometimes, but the thing is, I think it's good because I remember when the open theist guy debated the Dan Chapa had like strong arguments. Like he was like, he gave like standard anti-Molinist arguments. He was talking about stuff like I forget them. First arguments.
Yeah, I remember a little bit of that one.
So this is one of the times where I was like, this is like he's like totally outclassed. But what's funny is like most people are so weak they can't tell how weak they are.
Yeah.
So it's like they're just like ignorant of like how hard they're being bodied because they can't understand what's going on. But that's what I like. I mean, it's like to me that was. I wonder how that landed with the audience. And I know that you said you didn't really watch that too much, but I wonder how like general audiences appraised that debate, because I thought that was like the most one-sided, lopsided debate I've ever seen. Like that was like just totally obliteration. But what I think is obliteration is different than, because
right.
I don't know, man. It's weird.
So if I use this, if I learn how to use this, let's say I learn how to use this behind the scenes, then whenever I present, I won't call it an argument, but whenever I present whatever I present, the likelihood of me being closer to rational increases. Would you say that?
So usually rational is just like you're rational or you're not, and then there's different ways of saying it. Like to be rational, one way of saying it is as the disposition and circumstance C to believe.
So people are not more rational than others.
Yeah. So for example, this Bayes, you could have you can, but generally like there's just two classifications of people. There's like rational and irrational.
Okay. Well, let's finish this video.
Sorry.
No, this is great. I can't wait to run all this through Super Layman. You there, Howdy?
Yeah.
All right.
It's simple. If you believed in Jesus, you know you're saved. I am perfectly capable of saying, well, you know what? I may not believe that Christian anymore, but Jesus did say that if I believe in Jesus, I'm saved. And I believed in him, so I guess, listen, I don't think it's true, but if it's true, then if it was true and I'm wrong now, then I'm saved. So that's just the way that works. That's a logical argument. And so the difference in me and you is I'm discussing entailments of your position and you're discussing caricatures of my position. You're not thinking it through clearly.
That's just entirely false. This is the position that
wonderful assertion. I actually argued and you just made an assertion.
No, I already laid out my arguments. If you'd like,
Neither was an argument. That
again.
was a character.
It absolutely was an argument. I'm sorry that you don't, for some
Fair
reason,
enough.
all of a sudden, are
walked through- I
arguing with me about what an argument is.
Gentlemen, okay, next question. Eastgate Adoptionist, $5 super chat.
It's funny
Thank
how
you
they're
very
just
much.
talking about that after I just talked about that. It's weird.
Yeah. And this is my concern with debates. CJ Cox was able to look like he was holding things together. Now I think Chris dominated in every movement of this debate, but CJ was saving face. He looked like, but the reality was he was hiding all his beliefs. He was hiding all his accusations, and now all of it's coming out in this question and answer time, because he tried to do the free grace is fringe thing. Free grace is this, and this is what I attribute this to. In psychology, sociology, what they basically say is that people that are being watched, right? At first, they will put on a good impression. They will care about, impression management, that idea like that. But eventually they will fall into the habit of their normal behaviors, and you will actually be able to see them in the wild, even though they're in observation or something. And I know that all that needs to be qualified, but my point is that CJ's heart is being exposed. This is what we're seeing right now is the CJ that I dealt with informally debates and informal debates. I mean, the guy went after my Greek, and I'm not like your Greek argument is wrong. He basically said, I don't know Greek as much as he basically was saying I exaggerated everything. So in one of my debates, I brought up my transcripts and I said, look, I met these requirements. That's all I'm making a claim about. And other people have done that to me too. And they were not official transcripts, but they were transcripts from the website for the thing that we use. But the point is that it's those little underhanded tactics that CJ uses. And he tried to, I think he was mirroring Chris. He respects Chris. Chris is well put together, both philosophically, morally, even in looks. He looks like a professor and all of that. So CJ essentially was mirroring him or imitating him in certain areas like this. But now the true CJ comes out. That's what I feel like is happening right now. Because this is what I'm used to with CJ.
Well, I think Chris turned up the heat a little bit, and he sort of got inflamed and responded. You know how that goes.
Yeah, I can't remember who turned up the heat more. Oh, I remember. CJ asserted something about the Greek. So Chris disproved that. And then the next thing CJ does is he starts talking about free grace being fringe. And so that's definitely a defense mechanism, He's trying to lash out. And so when that happened, Chris was, okay, be Catholic. And then that's whenever they started going into all of that. Yeah.
What's it called when you it's a thing in like police where escalation. Usually it's when you escalate. When you escalate, you have a tendency or an inertia to escalate more.
Yeah, to outdo the other person. Yeah.
Loving Christ while we cause separation in the relationship with God. Are we to know God or only know about him?
No, we should definitely know God. You are not loving Christ when you cause separation. You are not loving Christ when you are not loving one another. And you are not merely to know about God. You are to know God. The call, as we just saw in verse 11, is to experiential knowledge. Those who abide with Christ in love are the ones who have that experiential knowledge. Those who know about Christ, whether they're saved.
Look at Matthew Cheevers in the chat. Chris pisses me off and I'm not even debating with him. Whenever he debated Steve Gregg, people were saying that Chris was basically a jerk, aggressive, and all of that. I'm like, you go in to debate a scholar, and the scholar says the area that in the argument that he used against Wilkin about the substantive participle, and he's like, I don't know Greek, or at least he says I'm not up on Greek, that type of thing like that. That's frustrating. And so I mean, Chris trained for a heavyweight match, and then when you get in there with the guy in the ring, you recognize this guy's not even ready to fight, or that he's not in your class. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that Steve Gregg is not a scholar in certain issues in certain areas, even though I don't agree with his conclusions of certain things. But in this particular area, they don't know free grace. They don't understand it. They don't have arguments prepared against it, and that's one benefit that we live off of. Free grace is sort of like I was just thinking about like a creature that is in a cavern, a subterranean area, and whatever, and because it hasn't been explored, it hasn't been dealt with, you don't know how to deal with this creature. Therefore, you have no defenses against this creature. So this creature comes out and just is attacking you and just hitting you with things that you've never been prepared for. So because we're niche in that sense, the likelihood of them defeating us is very low. Whereas the Catholic Church has had hundreds of years, and the Protestants have had hundreds of years to develop their arguments against each other. And a lot of it is ad hoc that gets institutionalized. Free grace hasn't had that, but we're willing to challenge everything. So I feel like free grace is getting stronger. I don't feel like free grace is getting weaker, and that's why I want opponents that are challenging, because I don't want to waste my time thinking I have everything going on right, that I'm in this area whenever it could be just settled. Somebody debate me and convince me that free grace is not true, and then I go debate on another side, or do something different. I was thinking about this today. I was like, if one of these people challenges me to debate in an area that I've never debated before, I think what I would tell that person, look, I'll debate you in this area, but I want you to give me your best book that represents your position and let me study that book. I think that would probably be the only way that I would debate outside of a certain area, and I can't remember which area I was thinking about it, willing to debate in. Maybe it was the I can't remember.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to debate a topic. Certainly, you don't want to debate a theological topic unprepared or flippantly, because what can happen is if a lot of people take up apologetics or enter Christian dialogue, and if you're not prepared, you'll be confronted with arguments that you're not prepared for, and you can be convinced from arguments that might not be good, but they're just good to you because you're not aware of their responses to them or the literature on the issues. And so like debating like the Trinity or something like that is quite dangerous. I would advise people not to debate areas that they're not very comfortable in. It's not something to play around with. You have to take, I would say, take this very seriously. I mean, very, very, very seriously. I can't emphasize that enough. You mentioned
Teach Yahweh. You saw what happened with her, right? She apostatized the Unitarian. So yeah, go ahead.
You also mentioned, free grace is French, so people aren't prepared. When we have these debates, they're sort of in our territory, and we're more confident. We're more studied in this area. They don't know our arguments, but we're familiar with all of their arguments against our position. And so we're not sharpening off of much of this. So the good news is, like, you're always going to win. The bad news is you're never getting sharpened. So there's this phrase that I like from Plato. He says, when he's arguing with someone, and he says, usually people think it's like embarrassing to be refuted. But Socrates says, "Oh, I hope you'll refute me and not weary of doing good to a friend." They're like, "Why would you want to be refuted?" Well, he's like, "What if you were sick? Would you not want to be cured?" It's like, "Of course I would want to be cured." And it's like, how greater an evil it is to have an illness of the body, or have an illness of the soul in comparison to that of the body. And it's better to. I would rather be refuted than to refute, just as it's better to be healed than to heal someone else. It's beneficial.
Yeah.
To be sharpened, but I would say definitely be careful, be prepared, and and take it very seriously. And then also, I think you have the right attitude about it. I don't think it's about winning. It's about improving.
Right, because the thing is that, you know, besides I'm going to have to write a thesis eventually, you know, for my other degree, it is about seeking truth and eliminating options, but I feel like that we try to give people material, we try to do everything we can to get these people to understand free grace enough to refute free grace. That's what we're trying to do. So we just don't want to win. And that's why I told people I need to start losing debates. Because in other words, I need to take more challenging, more technical debates that the likelihood of me convincing the audience are slim, but the information needs to get out there. That's like the Matthew 7 debate. I knew that was an uphill battle. You know, I think an exegetical oriented person would be convinced, but the common man is not going to be convinced. And things take a difficult time to catch on. And so, you know, I'm glad Chris is willing to tomorrow. We're going to react to Kevin's debate. I may still do the Steve Gray thing tonight. I don't know. We have to get through this one first.
Yeah, I'll probably not say much more. I think I've said quite enough and pretty much exhausted. So I'm probably just going to have like little chime-ins, but other than that, I got not much.
Okay. Yeah.
There can be people who know about Christ and are saved, people who don't know about Christ and are saved. That's a matter of putting your faith in Jesus. But the question is, if you're walking in that faith and loving Christ and loving one another, that's what the consistent argument is. John chapter 15, it's discussion tonight, is if you want to bear fruit, you have to abide in Christ. Abiding in Christ means not only continue the faith, but it specifically means loving one another.
CJ, anything you'd like to add to that?
Are we loving Christ while we cause separation of the relationship with God? No.
Now, this is interesting. I see I'm in the chat. I see I'm in the chat challenging Cheevers to a formal debate. I said, will you be willing to do a formal debate? And he just debated Twitchy. So he's in the debate circuit now. So it makes me wonder if I'm going to end up debating him.
Certainly not. There's not active love for Christ at that moment in time. Are we to know God or only to know about him? I think you are certainly to know him. In fact, one issue I've had with certain free gracers, and again, I recognize that nobody is a monolith, but I've heard many make the claim that, for example, in Matthew 7:7, when it says, I never knew you, that it's not actually necessary for God to know you in an intimate sense, or for you to know God's ways in an intimate sense in order for you to be saved. In that,
see, this is the Kevin argument. Yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. Kevin was borrowing from lordship in that argument. And the issue is that, okay, I can grant that God knows you in an intimate way, but that doesn't mean that know is being used in the same sense in 723.
That particular interpretation, I find that to be deeply heretical personally. Of course we are to know God. We are to know him intimately, not simply to have knowledge about him. And so I don't know if Chris would go as far as what I just said, but it sounds like we'd be broadly in agreement on that point, at least, which is we are not simply to know about the vague general existence of a deity up there, but
You see how he's straw manning right here? Christianity is not based on a vague existence of a deity. It's Yahweh, that Jesus is God, he's Savior, but he's trying to make it, oh, well, you just believe in theism.
but rather to know God on a personal level.
Chris, you get the last word if you'd like it.
Sure, there's a difference in a normative claim of what the Christian life is supposed to be versus the
Look what I say down here. Salvation is not by intimate knowledge or even by academic knowledge.
necessary conditions for salvation. The necessary condition for going to heaven has nothing to do with having
I said deity is not the same as Jesus the Savior.
a deep, intimate knowledge of God's ways. However, it is a necessary condition for having an experiential understanding of the deep, intimate knowledge of God's ways if you want to live out the Christian life and do what John 15 requires, which is to bear the fruit to which we were saved in the first place to do. So again, this is another example, I think, of CJ very, very possibly conflating two areas that should not be conflated.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, next one here comes in from Mr. Mike. We just got a couple more and then we'll wrap it up so people can go enjoy the after show on this Friday night. $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Doesn't 2 Peter 1:8-10 give us the formula how to know you're the elect? CJ, let's assume it's for you. 2 Peter 1:8-10. We can pull it up. Chris, looks like you have it pulled up, I think, at the bottom there.
Yeah, I just pulled it up right now. 2 Peter 8-10. I got it right here if you guys want to.
Okay, I'm gonna pull it up. But he that, CJ, any thoughts?
Yeah, let me read it here real quick. For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall. Excuse me, my goodness. For if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. He that lacketh these things is blind, cannot see afar off, and hath forgotten that he was purged from his old sins. Wherefore, the rather, brethren, give diligence to make our calling and election sure. For if you do these things, you shall never
It's for service.
fail. I think broadly speaking, I wouldn't call it a formula, because a formula is kind of like, I don't know, it sounds too definitive to me, I guess. And maybe I'm misunderstanding what Mr. Mike Carr means by formula, but I don't think it's like, okay, I don't know if I'm elect. Let me go to 1 Peter or 2 Peter 1 rather real quick, and we'll figure that out. But I do think that 1 Peter certainly, when it's describing in verse 6, really starts in verse 5, the fruits of the Spirit, the fruits of godliness, and essentially saying you can know, you can confirm your calling and election by seeing these things in your life. I think that's totally reasonable. I will say that in this particular passage, it does very much sound to me like this is more of a, once again, kind of a vocational thing, but that would just be kind of off the cuff a little bit, because admittedly, it's been probably 8 or 9 months since I've read through 1 and 2 Peter.
Thank you, CJ.
Seems like he's open to
So
the
CJ
possibility of, you could say, like free grace type interpretations in areas. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
softening or something.
yeah, I agree.
Point is the most important one. This is twice tonight. He has recognized properly that this election is unto service or unto your vocation. This is not about going to heaven, nor can it be. If you go back to the things that have to be added, there's 2 reasons you know that. First of all, add to your faith. Add, which means all the things here are not faith. These are things added to faith, which would mean that if you have to have these things to go to heaven, then it's false that all people of faith have everlasting life. So what do you have to add? Virtue. And we have to add to virtue knowledge, and we have to add to knowledge temperance, and you have to have patience, and you have to have godliness, and you have to have kindness, and you have to have charity. The claim would be, if this is how you know you're going to heaven, then you would have to have not only faith, but also knowledge and temperance and patience and godliness and kindness and charity. If you don't have all those things, then not only can you not know you're going to heaven, you would have to not be going to heaven, because this is what it takes to make your election sure, which is obviously just false, because again, first of all, this is not added to, these are things that are added to faith. And second of all, I just don't think that anybody, without lowering the bar, the way that we saw CJ do earlier, I just don't think anybody can look at their lives and say, I see these things on a consistent enough basis to go, yep, that's definitely me. However, what I can say is that there are times in my life where I can say, I'm doing this at times, and in those moments, you know what I'm doing? I am living out my vocation. So what do I do when I'm not living out my vocation? Get back to the vine, get back to love, get back to believing Jesus.
Thank
Good
you,
an-
Chris.
good
We can
answer.
either consider that as a question for the both of you, or CJ, if you feel it was more directed at you, you can have the last word. It's up to you.
Everything I say is right. Everything Chris says is wrong. And I'm just kidding.
That's one way to approach it.
No, I'm just messing. We can move on.
That's great, man.
You're a good sport. There's one here from Eastgate that I missed. I got to track it down. So in the meantime, let me pull this up. Then we'll do one from Eastgate. Then we'll wrap it up. So rational logic, 777 for Chris. If Christ says, without me, you can do nothing, how can an unregenerate person cooperate toward regeneration before being spiritually united to Christ?
He can't. John 15, as I was very clear about and strongly argued, is written for believers. So there's nobody unregenerate in John 15.
Thank you, Chris. CJ, anything you want to add?
Just that I wonder if, and I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if rational logic might be alluding to the greater doctrine of regeneration preceding faith here. If that's true,
Yeah, he's a Calvinist.
then I don't think he's necessarily misrepresenting Chris's position, but instead trying to say, if this is true, doesn't that have implications for other things you might believe? But if that's not true, then I think he is misrepresenting the position, because it was very clear, I think, that Chris believes everybody in John chapter 15 is saved. So that's the only thing I would say there. If rational logic is making a larger point, then perhaps he can clarify, and that might be a little bit more of a challenging question for Chris. But if he's just talking specifically about John chapter 15, then I think he might have misinterpreted what Chris was saying.
Chris, quick final word.
I just don't believe that regeneration precedes faith. I do want to say, Donnie, just 1 second. Just if anybody's interested, you can show this real quick. I'm not going to go through this, but I mentioned this just because I mentioned the Greek earlier. If anybody wants this, this is what I was saying. Email me. This is that verse, that list of verses to how you understand the present tense. And there's got dozens of verses on here that show this is what the present means when it started and when it's not. So I found the document. If you guys want it, I'll email it to you.
I have
Chris,
something
thank you. I'm
to
just trying to
say,
pull up these
actually.
last couple.
I was looking more into verbal aspect and action start, and more in the stuff that you had sent, and then also academic literature that aren't Christians, but are just doing, because everyone has an interest in both classical Greek and stuff like that. And so right now, I think that obviously Greek is a spectual, but I think that there is tense in the indicative.
Okay.
So there's miscommunication. People are using terminology in different ways.
Right.
The way that, so I would take sometimes what people think, or sometimes people say action start is the grammatical aspect, the lexical aspect, and the contextual aspect. You calculate that, and that's your action start. But I would say that that's just the interpretation, and the action start is the lexical aspect. So,
but isn't that's aspect? That's what's encoded in the word. Is it imperfective or perfective?
Well, I don't think that's in imperfective and perfective are there. I accept that there's the 5 classical categories of action start, and maybe some like event stuff. But I think like the 5 categories, because, okay, so languages don't come out and say, this is how we do things. People just speak, and then we sort of have to give theory about how, but yeah, so I think that action start is the lexical aspect, and in 5 major categories is one of the best ways to understand action start. Lexically is those 5 categories. And I think in Keeney Greek and even classical Greek that there's tense in the indicative mood right now.
Okay. So you're closer. Well, you're not riding with Porter right now,
No.
and that's fine. I'm not. I haven't read enough of Porter to side with them. Okay.
super chat so I don't miss any. And I found this one here. Eastgate, thank you very much. Okay, get it up again. $10 super chat for Chris. Hebrews 3 says the tribes in the wilderness had unbelief. Are we to infer that people following a literal pillar of, well, I guess I missed the rest of it.
Fire.
So pillar of smoke, and you're familiar with that, an evil heart of unbelief. Could these people be saved? I think is what Eastgate's trying to ask there.
Yeah, he said somewhere, do they have your definition of faith? Well, they did at one point. If you trace the logic in Hebrews 3, the whole point is if you lose your faith like the people in generation did, then you're not going to make it into the promised land, which is the land of rest. That gets typologically interpreted as going to heaven, but that's, as I've argued in other debates, Hebrews 3 is not about, the typology there is not about going to heaven. So yes, they had faith, and we know that because the text, and when I debated CJ, I showed the exact text that says, and they believed, like 3 or 4 times, and they believed. So yeah, then they lost faith. So this is yet another example of somebody who lost faith in time. Then the question becomes, okay, so then having lost faith, that's a possible thing. John 15, you can lose faith. All right, so having shown that, what's the outcome? And the conditionalist says they lose their salvation. I say, show me that text. I still haven't seen it.
Thank you, Chris. Any thoughts, CJ?
I would actually recommend people check out our previous debate. I think that would be better for them than anything I could give right now, just for sake of time. I will say briefly, just as a general rule when it comes to interpreting typology, typology is metaphor by its very nature. It's analogy, right? So if just because somebody might represent something doesn't necessarily mean that they themselves are that something. I always use the example of Moses. I think Moses clearly types those who die under the law, and he dies outside of the promised land as a result. But Moses was saved. I think that's very clear. He's in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews chapter 11. He's on the Mount of Transfiguration. He knew God face to face the way one knows a friend. So just because they might be representative of something doesn't necessarily mean that they themselves are meeting the definition of that something, if that makes sense.
Chris, final word?
I'll follow CJ's lead and say refer people back to our Hebrews debate, because actually I thought I was going to focus on Hebrews 6, but we focus on Hebrews 3, which is fine. So we have 3 hours on basically that verse.
And that was the goal, to have a go-to debate for people to enjoy with 2 different perspectives on Hebrews. So I recommend people checking that. It might even be in the description box of this video. So check that out, guys. If not, I'll make sure to put it there. $5 super chat. So we'll end it with one last question. It's been a great audience Q&A period, as I like to say. My goal is, and we're almost at an hour, it doesn't even feel like an hour on questions. It helps us to really expand on the topic, to clarify certain points, and to go in various directions, hit some rabbit trails that we might not have time to in the main portion. So here we go. Eastgate Adoptionist, $5 super chat. Chris, why would Jacob have a vision of the ladder unless he was involved? Do we join the Son of Man with baptism? So why not born again?
Okay, why have a vision of the Son of Man, of the ladder? Because you could see heaven. God was there confirming his covenant and saying he's showing this is the house of God, and so he is establishing this is where I met God, this is where he is, and therefore we're passing on the Abrahamic covenant in that particular passage. So no, he doesn't have to go up and down heaven. It's just that Jacob went up into heaven, I think is the text. Let's just be very nice and say the text doesn't say that. Do we join the Son of Man with baptism? That feels like a completely, depending on how you take baptism. It's not by water baptism. I think Romans 6 talks about being united with Christ in baptism. That's spirit baptism in context, in my view. So why not born again? I don't understand the syntax of so why not born again? We are born again. And so you believe in Jesus and are born again. So I'm not sure I followed that last bit.
CJ, any thoughts?
I am once again running into the problem that I don't necessarily understand what Eastgate is getting at. Do we join the Son of Man in baptism? So why not born again? I mean, if we join the body of Christ I would agree with Chris, by way of a spiritual baptism when Christ cleanses us of our sins, I think that's a one-to-one with being born again. Perhaps that gets at what you're talking about. And I don't know what you mean by Jacob being involved. I would certainly agree with Chris again that Jacob does not ascend into heaven himself. So what do you mean by Jacob being involved? Because the only involvement he needs is to have seen it. Ezekiel wasn't involved with the fall of Tyre, and Isaiah wasn't involved in the raising up of Cyrus. They just saw it. So I don't know. I find Eastgate, maybe I'm just dumb. I don't know. I find Eastgate's questions just hard to understand, honestly.
They're good brain exercises for us. And for that reason, Eastgate, we appreciate you. Thank you for the support.
Yeah, and for the record,
funny
Eastgate,
because
I just
his
really
name-
quickly, I don't mean to be insulting.
On the profile, you see how it says scripture decoded and unsealed, like, and then you're unsealing and decoding it and making it so everyone can understand, and then no one understands anything you're saying.
Right, yeah.
I say that. In fact, the self
Delusional, right?
appreciation there was a little bit to say it could entirely be my fault. I just find myself not understanding your questions more often than not.
CJ, don't be too hard on yourself. It's never your fault. Chris, any final words there?
No, again, I wish, because it's a super chat, and I really wish that I could find something. I know that I think
Braxton Hunter's in the chat over there. He says, "Hey guys, libertarian freedom is true. I wouldn't lie to you guys."
he's some version of orthodoxy, and there's some idea in orthodoxy of especially hesychasm, and there's this notion of mystical union. But now I'm trying to reconstruct a background for his question, and I'm with CJ. I'm lost, and I would like to say something edifying for the audience, and I can't. So I have failed you all. I'm so sorry.
You could never fail us, and CJ,
Hey, Braxton
never
Hunter.
be wrong. Braxton Hunter from the Trinity Radio, running a great channel ministry, puts on some great discussion, says, "Hey guys, libertarian freedom is true. I wouldn't lie to you guys." That's true.
Amen. It's true.
He might be
It's
coming
true.
at you a little bit though, CJ. Is he teasing you a bit?
I think he is. I think me and Braxton do. I wouldn't say we're like friends or anything like that, but we at least know who each other are. So he definitely knows I'm a Calvinist. So I imagine that was a little bit of a jab, but also Braxton's a super nice guy. So if it's a little jab, it's more like that.
True.
I will
I mean,
say though,
You
in
guys
defense
got thick skin. You can handle some jabs and some crosses and hooks.
let me say, in defense of my Calvinist brethren, I'm a libertarian guy, but I am very unimpressed with most libertarian defenses of, I think most Calvinists, especially high Calvinists, have a much, much, much more robust metaphysics. And I think most libertarians do a very poor job of defending libertarianism, and they should, but I think they do a very poor job of it. So if you are a Calvinist and a high Calvinist and you come at it from a high theology of God, I think your arguments are better than provisionists like myself give you credit for.
He does say he's a friend of the Calvinists. So
Yeah, and I did notice he said there he'd be happy to call me friend, and I would too. I never like to assume things, right? Because it's just because we know each other and have talked doesn't necessarily mean, because you never want to be in a position where you're like, yeah, we're friends, and then the other person's like, well, I appreciate it, but no, we're not. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I don't call people friends until usually they call me friend.
That's fair.
Nothing worse
I
than that.
assume that's my
It's like
fault.
when you think someone's waving at you and you wave back, but then you realize, oh, wait a minute, they're waving at someone behind me.
Yeah. I mean, and we can even use ourselves as an example. Me and Chris have shared with each other that if we were in the same town, we'd be down to hit a pub and have a beer and all that.
Absolutely,
I don't
man.
know if I could say now, and maybe you disagree with this, Chris. I don't know if I could go as far as to say friend, only because this is the only interaction we've ever had. You know what I mean? But maybe that's enough. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too wishy-washy with my definition. Who knows?
We could be friends if we were around. As far as
I have something to say
Well,
about this, and I don't know. If you're both in the metaphorical body of Christ, you have to be friends. You're to love one another, so that there's this how there's some apologetics where, okay, well, we're gonna make arguments to show that Christianity is true. And someone said something that I really appreciated. They said, why don't you just like focus on living a good life, being loving and caring and walking with Christ and enjoying the fruits of the Spirit and resting in his yoke. And just by doing that, everyone's going to come to you and inquire, is like, wow, I mean, this guy is just he's so tranquil, at peace and loving. Like, what is that? What is going on? Tell me, like, what has given you this? I think that's important. I think maybe that's a little bit neglected because everyone's always in this sphere of like debating.
Right. Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, definitely. But that relates to something that's called lifestyle evangelism.
Yeah.
That if you just live before people will ask, and you'll have an opportunity to share the gospel. well, the worst one is whenever they say you don't even need to share the gospel, just live before the person. You know that
I'm not saying that.
there's extremes there. Yeah, I know that's not what you're saying. I got you.
I'm just saying that
Yeah,
is just that can be just as effective as some of the apologetics. I'm not saying as an evangel, I'm saying as an apologetic.
Right? Yeah, it's preparatory.
Nothing but brother love for you, man.
One day we'll get together, just three friends who love theology and love debates, having a couple coffees and debating our differences. So Chris, CJ, this was an excellent debate. Hard to believe it's been 3.5 hours. It doesn't feel like it. This is proof. We proved this many times. You don't always have to do just general debate on massive topics like all things soteriology, where, hey, opening statements, we're bringing up all these different verses, John 15, James 2, book of Hebrews passages. No, we're taking a single passage and we're dedicating an entire night of discussion to it. So for those in the audience, you have the book of Hebrews, an entire debate on that between CJ and Chris. Excellent debate. Now we've got an entire exchange on John 15. Fantastic debate. Gentlemen, we're going to have to somehow get a trilogy in terms of the exegetical debate series. We'll have to pick another controversial path. Well, you guys have debated James 2 in the past, haven't you?
Right.
I think
There we go. Trilogy's complete. It's right on the same level as Lord of the Rings. Some might
CJ,
even
you
say.
wanted to talk about something else later on, so let's figure out what that was. So
We'll start a new debate trilogy. So,
Right.
guys, this was great. CJ, Chris, you gentlemen are great sports. I like the mini sparring matches that we got to enjoy during the Q&A. Those make the Q&A sessions that much more enjoyable. So, okay, soteriology showdown tonight. What is the best exegesis of John 15? I hope you in the audience enjoyed this as much as I did. Fantastic Q&A period. Thank you so much for the super chats, the questions, the challenges. Like I said earlier, you guys are the life and blood of this channel. But before we end it officially, let's get some final words, final thoughts. I want to show my appreciation yet again, CJ and Chris, in light of everything you guys have going on in your lives and how busy you are. I do appreciate the time that you offer for the debates, not only on debate day, but the prep and the study that goes into getting yourselves ready for these events. So quick final words, final thoughts. CJ, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me again. It's funny, you know, I brought this up actually a couple debates ago, but I reached out to you roughly 3 months ago, maybe, saying, "Hey, man, I feel like I used to be on the channel all the time, and now I haven't hit you up for anything. Do you by chance are you interested in hosting a debate or two?" And Donnie, I'm holding Donnie's beer, his coffee, his tea, and whatever else you can find at was it Hortons that you guys have in Canada? Because this is now, I think, my 5th in the last 2 months, with 2 more upcoming. So I say that only to say, Donnie, you are genuinely one of the biggest booms to my work, probably in the entire YouTube sphere, and I greatly appreciate everything you do for us. Because the reality is, it was really like this. Let's go. I got 2 with Chris. I got 2 with Dimitri. Let's you know what I mean? So I appreciate it a ton, man. You are absolutely one of my favorite people on this online sphere. And then Chris, this was an excellent debate. So thank you again for another excellent debate. I appreciate it. And nothing I said earlier was taken back just because we sparred a little. So
that's right.
Well, that's what makes a debate as fun as it can be. So CJ, those words are encouraging and motivating. I love you. I love you too, Chris. You guys are great brothers in the Lord. Excellent debaters. You guys always put on a good show. And I can always tell when the debaters that are featured on the channel have put in the necessary work and time and study to give us a thought-provoking exchange. And you gentlemen never disappoint. So CJ, I'll keep you busy. That is for sure. I have no problem doing that. Chris, I'll keep you busy as well as I'm doing. And so it's great to have you both come together and duke it out for a few hours. So CJ, Chris, final words, final thoughts. Thank you for doing this.
Best debate channel on the internet. I appreciate you. CJ, I really appreciate the time. The only thing that bothers me about the channel is not anything about the channel, it's about the fact that we're online. And I really, really do. You know, you sign off here, you have good vibes. I don't always have good vibes when I sign off. I always say something nice, but I generally don't. But CJ, I always enjoy. We say what we mean. People can learn from the differences and go, man, they really strongly clash there. That's a good thing. And I really do wish that we could hang out because you seem like a genuinely cool guy. So, but yeah, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate the audience. And I just hope you guys, same thing CJ said before, just get in the text, man. Just get in the text.
Amen. Praise the Lord. Thank you for the final words, final thoughts, Chris and CJ. For those that want to see more from you gentlemen, you're putting out content over on your channel. You guys are clearly active in the debate world, and for that, I appreciate it. So for those that want to see more from Chris and CJ, please check the live chat. Doki Doki, thank you for posting their links throughout. Check the description box. Give them a subscription. Give them a follow. Show them some love and also some support. YouTube. Just type in CJ Cox versus Chris Morrison. I just did it, and you'll see all their past 3 debates come up. James 2, John 15, Book of Hebrews. We're digging deep together. So, okay, CJ, Chris, we will let you gentlemen out of here. I know you have other things to do and an after show to go to. So, Chris, CJ, God bless the two of you. And all right.
So I'll show you. I don't know if you can see my screen when I change it.
Yeah.
If you go to my playlist for my debates, there's only 35 here. So for whatever reason, they've not been uploaded on his. I do it myself on my own channel. But yeah, you can't see all of my debates here. And some of them are on other channels, but most of my debates, of course, are on SFT. All right, well, we made it. We finished it. Heart to Laugh says, positive acquaintance, not friend. Okay. 1 Peter 3:1-2, legacy standard. Oh, here it is. In the same way, you wives, be subject to your own husband. So even if they're disobeying the word, maybe one without the word. Yeah, that example of the lifestyle thing. As they observe your pure conduct with fear. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say, Howdy, before we land?
No, that was it. Thanks for having me and letting me try to add.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely learning. And I learned in the stream and then after the stream when I run everything through Super Layman. And so thank you too. So y'all check out more content, old stuff, new stuff. It's all good. I don't know if I'm going to stream again tonight. I'm supposed to meet with somebody, but we got rescheduled, but I may have to meet with them now. And I don't say I don't want to do it. I mean, it's just scheduling. So I look forward to meeting with them. But anyway, yeah, y'all check out more content, old stuff, new stuff. It's all good. God bless.